was like a radio from his previous life, which needed to be tuned to a specific frequency to receive certain wavelengths. Otherwise, all you'd hear was static noise. The spell Mark Vinica was about to cast was essentially a specific frequency receiver, and the seagull's spirit fragments were the wavelengths. Although Rain didn't understand why Vinica was so insistent, he concluded that she probably didn't have any malicious intent or ulterior motives. After a moment's consideration, Rain nodded and said, "All right then, I appreciate your help, Miss Vinica." "It's no trouble at all. Please do not resist, Lord Rain," Vinica said as she drew a wooden stick around 1/2 meter in length from her robe's sleeve, murmured a spell, and then lightly tapped Rain's forehead. With Rain's spiritual power, he could distinctly sense as if an external port had been added to his mental sea. Then a seagull, summoned by Vinica, flew down and circled Rain, and he heard a mental fragment surface within him, the enemy, numerous, the valley. Even though Rain had already anticipated this, he was still quite surprised by the effectiveness of the technique. Moreover, the simplicity of the message was likely influenced by the bird's limited brain capacity, which prevented it from conveying complex content like a human. If it were a higher-level mammal, perhaps the messages transmitted could be more complex and precise. This realization ignited an eager anticipation within Rain for Enya's bird transformation technique. "Lord Rain, with this, isn't it more convenient for you to fight?" Vinica's beautiful eyes caught the surprise that flickered in Rain's gaze, and she spoke with a pleased tone. The girl's deliberate demonstration of witchcraft did not repel Rain. "Indeed, it's very useful," Rain confirmed with a smile. "By the way, Lord Rain, I also have several sorcery scrolls with me. Would you like to take them as well?" Vinica asked. Several sorcery scrolls." Rain looked at Vinica in surprise. He had not expected the girl before him to be an otherworldly pretty and wealthy type. His own 2 sorcery scrolls were treasures he had yet to bring himself to use. But considering that Vinica was a 3rd-level wizard apprentice with an inheritance, Rain understood. A wizard apprentice with an inheritance usually carried multiple sorcery scrolls and even some special witchcraft tools on their travels to greatly enhance their combat power. Even a typical great knight would not be a match for them. However, Rain casually noticed Mary's slightly furrowed brow. He immediately understood that these sorcery scrolls must have been provided by Vinica's mentor for her protection. Taking it myself clearly wasn't appropriate. Another point was that soon I wouldn't be with the team, in case Vinica and Mary was suddenly attacked by pirates or other forces. Our overall combat ability would be greatly weakened. After all, a 3rd-level wizard apprentice with or without a sorcery scroll was a completely different level of combat power. Relaying on this elite squad, Rain estimated that at best they could defeat 40 or 50 pirates. If it was the Black Sail pirate Vice Captain Phil leading the team, they would probably be overpowered. Therefore, Rain shook his head and declined. "Thank you, Miss Vinica, but for a small group of pirates, I think I won't need to use this precious sorcery scroll. Keep it for your own protection. Besides, your spirit imprint has already been a big help to me." Rain smiled at the young girl. "Lord Rini is right. Vinica, you should keep it for your own defense. It's something Master Annius specifically instructed you to have on hand," Mary added just in time. All right then." Seeing both insisted, Vinica could only nod her head and reluctantly agree. "Then I will set off now. Major Mary, please strengthen your vigilance. I should be back in about an hour." "Yes, Lord Riani, please be very careful." Mary nodded her head. "Lord Riani, follow my seagulls then. Where the seagulls circled overhead, that is where the enemies are located." Rain took his pack off the sturdy Black Pearl, placed it on the luggage rack at the back of the carriage, and with a light leap, he controlled the Black Pearl to follow the direction the seagulls were flying, quickly heading to the first location. Near a road north of Fishing Port Town, in a narrow, dense valley, a dozen burly men were each wiping their weapons. They were the elite of the small pirate group, the Clark Pirate Squad. "Hey Blackbeard, those seagulls in the sky are a bit strange, aren't they?" One of the men inadvertently glanced at the sun and saw several birds, clearly seagulls, circling overhead. What about them?" The burly man known as Blackbeard first looked up with confusion, then nodded his head soberly after a while. "Indeed odd, we're not by the sea. Seagulls usually circle around for food, like small fish and shrimps." As the first mate of the Clark Pirate Squad with abundant sea navigation experience, Blackbeard easily spotted what was awry. "Damn it, there isn't a drop of water here. What the hell are these stupid birds looking for?" said the man with the scarred face who had first spoken, spitting out a blade of grass from his mouth. But Blackbeard was still pondering over the matter. when things are out of the ordinary. There must be a demon at work. He thought it would be best to tell his brothers to be on the alert. Scar tell the brothers to be on the alert, but as soon as he spoke out, the scar-faced boatswain laughed it off without a care. Just over a few stupid birds, isn't that overreacting? This. Blackbeard thought about it and felt the same. After all, it was just a hunch since not even the shadow of an enemy was seen. To be on alert now seemed a bit much. Primarily because pirates tend to be unruly, each with their own faction. Strength speaks louder, and although a dozen elite pirates with his strength being slightly stronger were not much stronger than Scar. Secondly, these men were all old slickers. And the team was not easy to lead, subtly divided into 3 factions. At this moment a muffled hoofbeat suddenly came from a distance. "Hey, we have a visitor. Quick, brothers, get moving." With that, the slickers who had been basking in the sun perked up and they suddenly sprang into action. A bird was one thing, but a horse was something else. A horse meant there might be income coming in. "Look quick, such a tall black warhorse, it must be valuable." One old slicker pointed at Rain, galloping towards them. "That shiny silver armor looks good too. Seems like high-quality knight's plate armor should be even more valuable. The guy must be a seasoned knight. Probably not easy to deal with. What's there to fear? It's just one person. Such a tall black warhorse, so fast is he coming for us." When Blackbeard saw Rain riding the Black Pearl charging rapidly towards them, for some reason the first thought that popped up in his mind was that it seemed he was specifically targeting them. "Prepare for battle," shouted Blackbeard. However, Rieni, with the information given by the seagulls, had already pinpointed the group's location. At that moment, he looked up. Although the number of pirates was slightly smaller, they were more elite than the previous wave of pirates and seemed to have plenty of combat experience. But in the face of absolute strength, the value of experience greatly diminished. Rieni, taking advantage of the horse's galloping momentum, leaped into the air like an arrow from a bow, shooting towards the pirates. From the pirates' point of view, they saw a blurred figure rush instantly towards them, and in the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of their frontline comrades. Almost simultaneously, several blurred figures appeared. Boom, boom, boom. Upon contact, 3 fell immediately. This caused the remaining members of the Clark pirate squad, including Blackbeard and Scar, to be filled with terror. Damn it, where did this powerhouse come from? They feared that not even their own leader was this strong. Why are they fixated on us? Moreover, this narrow mountain valley is an extremely secretive place. So how were we exposed? In a flash, a spark of inspiration crossed Blackbeard's mind. He knew it was those white seagulls. But at that moment he suddenly saw an iron fist, glittering with silver light, appear in front of his stomach. Bang! Blackbeard's eyes bulged out, nearly popping out of their sockets as a bulge suddenly appeared on his back. His entire body was lifted half a meter off the ground by the force of the punch. The next second, he was on his knees, clutching his stomach, collapsed on the ground. Half a minute later, including the man with the scarred face, there wasn't a single pirate left standing. Rain, following old routines, picked 2 pirates who were relatively strong and kept them alive to interrogate separately. "Which pirate crew do you belong to?" "The Clark Pirate Group." "Where's your base, or rather your lair?" "That." Blackbeard's eyes flickered as he hesitated whether to speak or not. He wondered if he should use this information to negotiate with the stranger in front of him for the condition of letting him live. "Too bad, you've made the wrong decision." Rain glanced over, shook his head, and with a punch to the forehead, turned and walked away. Scarface, on the other hand, had never seen an interrogation like Rain's, where he hardly gave any time to think. Seeing Rain approaching him, he frantically waved his hands and said, No, I'll talk. Our base is on Egwas Island." "What about the base of the Sea God Sect?" "Sea God Sect? I really don't know about that. Maybe our captain does." "And what about the bases of other pirate crews?" "That, I'm not too clear on that." Goodbye. Am I going to survive?" Relief spread across Scarface's expression. This was truly a stroke of luck from the jaws of death, but before he could fully blossom into a smile, Rain, who had just said goodbye, suddenly threw a punch as swift as lightning and then leapt onto the Black Pearl. And the next second, a thud, like the sound of a watermelon violently smashed with a bat, rang out. While riding forward, Rain glanced at the system prompt. "Your skill Takadar fist technique has improved. Experience plus 121. You have gone through a battle, Knight, Transcendent, experience plus 42. Seeing Kadar martial arts reach LV5, 325/2000, progress hitting 1/7, Rain nodded slightly to himself. Indeed, even the leg of a mosquito is meat. This made him look forward with a slight anticipation to the pirates at the next point. Hopefully, they would be a bit stronger. 15 minutes later, the second point was cleared. 28 minutes later, the third point was cleared. Kadar Martial Arts reached LV5, 587/2000, the progress now over 1/4, and now it was time for the last point. At the side of the Special Forces carriage, a white seagull quickly descended and circled around Vinica before heading off once more. This was just one of the white seagulls responsible for continuously conveying messages. Seeing Vinica's dazed expression, Mary asked, "What's wrong? Is there a problem on Rain's end?" "No, it's just going too smoothly. Lord Rain has barely stopped. Now he's already en route to the fourth point. Judging by his speed, I estimate that it'll take at most 50 minutes to wrap this up if he keeps going like this. Such exaggerated strength. He truly lives up to being the top of this year's Minster Province knighthood evaluation." The girl's twin ponytails bounced as she turned her head to speak to Mary. The cavalry nearby exchanged glances, evidently quite amazed. It looked like they were probably here just to be onlookers on this mission. At that moment, a white seagull swooped down from the sky and circled around Rain. Rain quickly received the message it conveyed: enemy. Many. One man in black. Many. Rain thought for a moment but didn't pay it much mind. For the white seagull, there was no distinction between a dozen and 20, hence both scenarios were labeled as many, a limitation of its cognitive capacity. One man in black. This made Rain pause because it was the first time such accurate information had come through the white seagull. It seemed this man in black must be somewhat special. A heightened sense of alertness emerged within Rain's heart. When Rain arrived near the fourth point, he saw a group of brawny men dressed as pirates bidding farewell to a man in a black robe. Clearly, the man in black mentioned in the seagull's mental fragment was this man in the black robe. Rain immediately focused his attention on the man in the black robe. The man was muscular and robed in black, hooded, and had his hands crossed inside his sleeves. Though it seemed like he was concealing something else inside, his billowing sleeves bulged out. The moment Rain laid eyes on this black-robed figure, he felt that the man was not simple. As the man lifted his head, revealing golden eyes beaming with hostility, Rain's danger perception immediately began to send warnings, this intensity of warning. Nearly a great night. This caused Rain's heart to momentarily grow cold. "Captain Jeff, it looks like a little trouble has come knocking. Do you need my assistance to deal with it?" the man in the black robe asked, his voice strange and deep. "Well, if the envoy is interested, that would be ideal." Jeff, the brawny man, glanced at Rain, knowing he would not be easy to deal with. Riding in knightly plate armor, mounted on what seemed to be a heavy warhorse, clearly, he was a veteran knight or even a peak knight. Moreover, the figure in the black robe was charging straight at them, as if they had long been discovered. In that case, their purpose was not so simple. Rain fixed his gaze on the black-robed individual, maneuvering his warhorse to slowly approach. At this moment, dozens of elite members from Jeff's pirate crew, armed with weapons, all circled around them. "Kid, you!" a burly man wielding a chain hammer scolded Rain. Bang! It was just a punch, but Rain hit the burly man so hard that he folded up. Arms and legs stretched straight out in front of him as he crashed heavily to the ground, the words at his mouth never to be spoken. Then, with a flurry of movement, several pirates who were unclear of the situation and attempted to launch a sneak attack were now also lying on the ground. All at once, the pirates were intimidated by Rain's momentum and shrank back, not daring to advance. Rain's eyes, however, stayed locked on the black-robed person, never wavering. He knew that this was the opponent he needed to take seriously, not the trash fish in front of him. Seeing his elite subordinates taken down so quickly, Captain Jeff couldn't help but turn ashen. He thought about charging forward himself, but gave up on the idea as he realized he had no chance of winning. Meanwhile, the emissary stood still, not daring to urge him on. "Oh, it turns out to be a peak knight. Interesting," the figure in the black robe remarked. "Captain Jeff, it looks like you'll have to thank me. If it weren't for me being here by chance, I'm afraid you all." "Of course, emissary, the Jeff's pirate crew needs your help." "Young man, impressive strength. It seems your identity is not so simple, but unfortunately your life ends here." "Don't you think you talk too much?" Rain said bluntly. "I'm in a hurry." Rain estimated the time. At this point, he was supposed to have started his return journey. But now he was about 3 minutes late. After all, being punctual is a good habit. Rain always tried to make it a priority whenever conditions allowed. Rain's words caused the black-robed figure's eyes to twitch, clearly angered. Whoosh! The figure charged at Rain at a speed that was no slower than his. Facing what was most likely a great knight-level expert, Rain naturally did not continue to choose the LV5-level Kadar martial arts to face his enemy, but instead, his right hand gripped the handle of the dual-handed hammer behind his back. However, oddly enough, when the attacker launched his assault, he did not use any weapons. Whether that was due to arrogance or some other reason was unknown. Heavy hammer, furious strike. Rain aimed a swift hammer blow at the figure's head. Facing Rain's strike laden with triple effects, lifting as if weighing nothing, multiple shocks, and precision LV3, the figure surprisingly did not dodge but raised his hand to block it directly. Clang, whoosh! The robes on the figure's forearm instantly tore apart, and under Rain's astonished gaze, revealed a pale golden huge claw. The claw's outer shell must have been extremely sturdy, and the surface of the huge claw seemed to have a layer of light blue, watery energy flowing over it, which significantly weakened the multiple shock forces from Rain's hammer. The figure's bizarre appearance and the respectful manner of the surrounding pirates towards it, in an instant, made three words pop into Rain's mind. "See God sect?" Rain couldn't help but blurt out. "Oh, you guessed correctly, but there's no reward," replied the emissary. Clang, clang, bang. As the battle ensued, the figure's black robes were torn apart, revealing more and more of the body beneath them. The tentacle-like squirming beards, the chunky lobster-like exoskeleton protecting vital parts of the body. The wafting scent of the sea that the battle released. Aside from maintaining a humanoid silhouette, too many parts of the figure were no longer human. Rain's original plan was just to take out these small factions of pirates and then look for the vice-captain of the Black Sail pirate crew. He had never anticipated crossing swords with the Sea God sect so soon. But now he was engaging in close combat with the Sea God sect. But that's also good. After the initial probing, Rain had basically grasped the extent of his opponent's strength. Comparable to the physical qualities of a great knight, but the opponent's outer layer of water film was truly troublesome, seemingly able to neutralize most damage. With both factors combined, the opponent's strength was even greater than that of the rebellious army's general Zaral Perix. Boom! The two were once again separated by over 10 meters due to the fierce collision. At this time, the Sea God sect's Miarco also realized something was amiss, because his opponent was so strong, almost like a great knight. "Are you a great knight?" "No, you're not showing any signs of primal force release." Miarco could not help but scrutinize Rain repeatedly. Only then did he notice that Rain was holding a two-handed warhammer in his hands and also carried a dual-handed greatsword on his back. Such a gear setup was quite rare, instantly sparking a sense of familiarity in him. Suddenly, a flash of insight crossed his mind, and he blurted out, You're the new governor of Fishing Port Town, Rain." Miarco's words immediately made Rain across from him startle. Huh, how does the opponent know who he is? If they knew he was Rain, that would still make sense, but knowing he was the new governor of Fishing Port Town meant something quite out of the ordinary. However, Rain did not have the habit of replying to his enemy's questions. Instead, he quickly recited a spell, casting the witchcraft high-temperature force field. At the same time, he slightly twisted the handle of his two-handed warhammer, turning the pointed end of the warhammer's head upwards. Although Rain didn't respond to his question, Miarco had already convinced himself that his judgment wasn't wrong. The figure of Rain, currently holding the two-handed warhammer and carrying the dual-handed greatsword, obviously matched the image transmitted by the Black Flame Church. Secondly, in this territory, aside from this newly appointed governor of Fishing Port Town, it was highly unlikely for such other high-level masters to be present. Considering the timing, his arrival was indeed due in the next few days. Yet unexpectedly, the opponent had arrived a few days early, but that turned out to be fortunate. He didn't expect to solve the opponent here before the Furious Wave operation. A smirk appeared on Miarco's face, but the next second his smile froze. Fire-based witchcraft. Miarco's expression grew earnest. Amongst the disciples of the Sea God sect, what they hated and feared the most was, naturally, flames. What surprised him was that Rain would actually cast witchcraft, which wasn't recorded in the information passed on by the Black Flame Church. Boom! The two once again engaged in high-speed combat. Seen were two blurry figures rapidly dashing across the open ground, while the earth would occasionally burst open, the muffled sounds of impacts frequently ringing in the ears. But in just a few seconds, Miarko realized something was off. While the strange witchcraft's power unleashed by his opponent was not apparent, he felt waves of heat assaulting him, and his water shield was beginning to show signs of evaporation. Snap! This strike saw Rain's warhammer pierce through the water membrane, striking Miarko's hard lobster pincers, leaving a thumb-sized notch on their tough shell. This greatly startled Miarko. What kind of witchcraft is this? How could it dissolve my shield? Miarko exclaimed in surprise. In fact, he had misjudged. It wasn't that Rain's witchcraft high-temperature force field dealt significant damage. It was merely the continuous high temperatures exceeding 100 degrees that greatly reduced the stability of his water membrane shield, and its defensive power began to fluctuate, becoming increasingly unstable. What was more crucial was that Rain was currently using the pointed end of his warhammer, which had an armor-piercing effect. Armor penetration, passive effect. Your intuitive grasp of sharp weapons has reached a high level, allowing you to concentrate strength at a single point and detonate it, significantly increasing the probability of breaking through the enemy's armor. With both these factors in play, statistically speaking, the possibility of breaking through the water membrane shield became very high. That last hammer strike had been a success. Seizing the opportunity, Rain continuously executed the Tokkul hammer technique, barraging with hammer strikes, instantly forcing Miarko into consecutive retreats. It seems Miarko realized how indecently pathetic he looked, especially in front of his fellow pirates, prompting him to bellow fiercely and counter with a hard smash of his lobster pincer against Rain's warhammer. Clang! Sparks flew in all directions. Simultaneously, a segment the length of a phalanx of a finger on the lobster point was shattered by Rain's warhammer. But the massive rebound force caused both men to be repelled. Miarko, leveraging this painful strike, got a much-needed opportunity to catch his breath. This time, he had learned his lesson and didn't waste time talking. Instead, he began to rapidly recite some kind of prayer. But naturally, Rain wouldn't allow his opponent to perform his dark rituals. With a push-off from the tip of his foot, the ground exploded with soil, and he zoomed towards Miarko like an arrow released from its bow. But the next second, Rain's pupils abruptly narrowed. Miarko's chest suddenly swelled, his neck thickened alarmingly. As if a cannonball were about to be fired from his chest cavity, Rain was all too familiar with this kind of physical change. After all, his signature move of the giant bear sword technique Roaring Strike was just like this. Clearly, the opponent was preparing to launch some kind of area attack. But at this moment, he was still 4 or 5 meters away from Miarko, too late to stop it directly. In the blink of an eye, Rain spun around and immediately dashed to the left. At the same time, he swung his dark, gloomy pig-head hammer from above, fiercely slamming it into the ground, the secret hammer skill technique known as earth-splitting hammer. Boom! A large clump of soil was struck hard into the air. Almost simultaneously, Miarko's mouth spat out a wrist-thick stream of pale yellow, foul-smelling liquid. He swiveled his head from side to side, spraying in all directions. One of the pirates from Jack's crew couldn't dodge in time and got completely drenched. SSS! SSS! The soaked pirate immediately screamed in agony. Clutching his face with both hands, he began melting like a wax figure from head to toe. Rain's eyes narrowed. He had thought the enemy would use sonic attacks, but instead, Miarko had sprayed some kind of highly corrosive liquid. Nonetheless, this didn't impede Rain's response. Both were area attacks. The large piece of soil that Rain had just struck into the air met with the pale yellow acid spewed by the enemy, creating a barrier like a curtain and kicking up a cloud of smoke on contact, blocking most of the liquid. Due to the barrier of soil, only a few drops of the acid landed on Rain's hydrosteel armor, making a sizzling, corroding noise. Seconds later, Miarko, who had stopped spraying acid, peered through the pale yellow smoke to check the results of the attack, but suddenly, a blinding light shot out from the dissipating smoke. The glare caught Miarko off guard, forcing him to close his eyes and hastily use his arms to block the light's assault on his retina's scorching light. It turned out that Rain had seized the moment to cast this flashbang-like witchcraft. Immediately after, a figure burst out of the smoke, a dark greatsword aimed directly at Miarko, who was still covering his eyes. By the time Miarko realized what was happening, the dark pig-head hammer was already inches away. This caused his pupils to shrink in an instant. In a moment of crisis, he immediately blocked Rain's hammer assault with the giant pincers on his hand, all the while with a ferocious expression, uttering 2 short, sharp tones. Crack! Marco's giant pincer carapace instantly shattered. However, the tip of Rain's pig-head hammer had pierced into the giant pincer. Suddenly, Marco's squiddy whiskers, which had looked quite harmless, shot out and tightly coiled around Rain's pig-head hammer. At the same time, his mouth opened wide, as he was about to spit out that same corrosive liquid again. Without a moment's hesitation, Rain pushed off with the tip of his foot, and instead of withdrawing, delivered a lightning-fast uppercut straight to Marco's chin. This direct hit forced Marco's mouth shut, immediately aborting his plan to spit the acid at close range. Following that, instead of struggling with Marco over the hammer, Rain grabbed the hilt of his greatsword and launched a vicious arcing slash. A flash of light whizzed by. Thud! The sound of something heavy hitting the ground echoed. There lay the pig-head hammer wrapped in octopus-like whisker tentacles on the ground. Rain's previous slash had cut off most of Marco's whiskers. At the moment, pale green bodily fluid was spurting from the cut ends of Marco's whiskers. Ah! Marco only felt a chill on his chin, followed by an intense jolt of pain that made him scream out loud. One must realize that his octopus-like tentacles, though appearing as whiskers, were not dead hair, but rather living tissue akin to muscle. Marco's complexion changed drastically. At this point, he had completely lost the desire to continue the fight. Damn it, this Rain is even stronger than the information passed on by the Black Flame Church. Curses, the Black Flame Church. Even they were faking it with their Sea God sect. He had to return to the sect and report this news immediately. Marco hurriedly retreated behind him, using one of the pirates as a shield. Rain was relentless, delivering a 45-degree smooth cleaving slash without a moment's hesitation, cleaving the pirate into two halves and nearly spilling Marco's guts as well. This action terrified the surrounding pirates, who started to flee in fear. Marco, in a disheveled state, once again took cover behind Captain Jack. This turned Captain Jack's face iron blue. Fuck, if you can't beat them, run for it. Damn it, using us as meat shields, what's the meaning of this? Do you think we're idiots? Fucking Sea God sect. Facing the swiftly approaching Rain, Captain Jack performed a donkey roll to the side to avoid him. It was unbecoming of a pirate gang leader to dodge in such a manner. It effectively saved him from Rain's furious slash. But Marco hadn't expected Captain Jack to suddenly dodge, resulting in a new wound on himself, which made him no longer dare to use the pirates as shields, but instead fled rapidly towards the distance. Yet Rain was right on his heels. With big fish in sight, he naturally didn't care about the pirate shrimps. Watching as the two disappeared into the distance, one chasing and the other fleeing, the remaining members of Jack's pirate crew looked at each other in confusion. At that moment, a bearded burly man asked Captain Jack, "Boss, should we go help? Help?" Captain Jack gave his subordinate a scornful look and smacked him on the back of the head with a slap. "Are you an idiot? But boss, Marco is from the Sea God sect. Marco is your daddy or what?" With a slap, another blow landed on the back of the head. "Didn't you see that bastard eventually couldn't beat him and used us as human shields? Sea God sect. Damn it, a few years ago without them, we had it much easier in these waters, pa. Hurry up, before they come back, let's retreat to the sea." "Boss, what if Marco goes back and says we didn't follow orders, what then?" The burly man finally came to his senses this time, not even adding the word sir for the other party. "Him. I reckon he's as good as dead." Jack recalled the expressionless young man, his face growing stern with a hint of fear as he spoke. "Move it, leave everything, get back to the ship quickly." Captain Jack waved his hand and took the lead. More than 20 pirates immediately followed suit, rushing toward the seashore. By the Special Task Force's carriage, a white seagull descended rapidly and circled around Vinica before alighting on her arm, seemingly receiving some information. Her brows furrowed as she said, Lord Rini has deviated from the original route. He is now racing towards the seashore." Has he encountered some situation?" Mary's expression couldn't help but change slightly. "The white seagull told me that Lord Rini is chasing a man in black, both moving very quickly," said the girl with bouncing twin ponytails, turning her head to Mary. After a moment's thought, Mary voiced her assessment. "I see. It seems quite likely that Lord Rini has stumbled upon some big fish. Having witnessed Rini's speed, anyone who could escape from his grasp must be extraordinary. Among the pirates, such an individual would naturally be a big catch. Only she feared that there might be some sort of trap, luring Rini into it. If that were the case, it would be bad." "Major Mary, should we immediately go to help?" the girl asked eagerly. After all, what excitement was there in merely being a messenger compared to engaging in battle herself? That's what the girl thought. Wait a bit, if Lord Rieni needs help. I'm sure he would send a message through the White Seagull to you, wouldn't he? Mary replied calmly. That should be the case, said the girl somewhat disheartened. Meanwhile, Rieni and Miarko's chase continued. Although Miarko's giant pincers were shattered and his octopus tentacles had been cleanly severed, rendering him not lightly wounded, his legs were uninjured. Therefore, in his frenzied flight, Rieni for the moment could not quite catch him. However, Rieni was not in a hurry since it was unlikely that Miarko could maintain such a desperate fleeing pace indefinitely. It should be only a matter of time before his energy drained, slowing him down. Indeed, a few minutes later, Miarko's speed began to slacken, and Rieni did not hesitate to add a point to agility. With the remaining attribute points going from 5 right arrow, for his agility went from 22 points to 23 points. Instantly, a warm current pumped vigorously from his heart, sweeping away all the soreness and fatigue from Rieni's muscles in the blink of an eye. Swoosh! A deep, bone-deep gash appeared on Miarko's back shell. This made Miarko jump in fright, and when he looked back, his eyes bulged. He saw Rieni getting closer and closer. How could this be possible? His own energy was depleting so much, but damn it, the other guy seemed just fine and was getting closer and closer. Miarko's heart sank. Suddenly, a hidden cave appeared in front of Miarko. The cave was just big enough to fit a person, probably the burrow of some small bear species. Miarko's eyes lit up as he came up with an excellent idea. That Rieni was skilled with two-handed weapons, and whether it was the two-handed warhammer or the dual-handed greatsword, Miarko had just experienced firsthand that both were of very high caliber. Damn it, who knows how that kid trained. But in this narrow cave, if he dared to charge in, his two-handed weapons would hardly be able to swing freely, thus most of his combat power would naturally be wasted. In that case, not only did he no longer need to run away, but he might even have the chance to turn the tables. Swoosh! Miarko plunged headfirst into the cave. Rieni slowed down slightly at the mouth of the cave. He quickly scanned around the entrance, determining that this was not a trap prepared in advance by Miarko, but more likely an animal's den, and also dashed into it. At this moment, he also surmised why Miarko would willingly enter a dead end. Boom, boom, the two started to exchange blows quickly within the narrow cave, having put away the glimmering greatsword early on. Rieni was now fighting the completely exhausted Miarko with his bare fists, but the Kadar martial arts at level 5 could not execute secret techniques nor completely dominate Miarko in skill. One shouldn't forget that Rieni was at his peak physical condition after just adding the points. Nothing beats the strength of youth. Every hit of his gauntlet-covered iron fists was heavy and powerful. In such cramped quarters, it was nearly impossible for the opponent to dodge, leaving no choice but to trade blows. Each time the shattered giant pincers defended, it was tantamount to Miarko suffering agony akin to childbirth. Minutes later, Rieni emerged from the cave, dragging the barely alive Miarko by one leg. Although the opponent was beaten to the brink of death, he still refused to disclose any information related to the Sea God sect. The fanaticism of the cultists towards their faith is unimaginable to ordinary people. Rain thought about it. Perhaps for such cultists, the Navy might have more targeted methods to pry open their mouths. However, Rain was not without his gains. He glanced at the system notifications that had just flooded his screen. Your skill toggle hammer technique has gained an increase. Experience plus 698. Your skill giant bear sword technique has gained an increase. Experience plus 466. Your skill Kadar martial arts has gained an increase. Experience plus 423. Your skill high temperature field has gained an increase. Experience plus 26. Your skill blazing light has gained an increase. Experience plus 17. You've undergone a battle Knight Transcendent. Experience plus 285. Wizard Apprentice Transcendent. Experience plus 151. Kadar martial arts has reached LV5 1010/2000, progressing well over half. Because just now in the cave, Rain was punching, forcibly knocking down the opponent. And in that battle, Rain also used a lot of witchcraft, so the experience reward for Wizard Apprentice Transcendent was quite considerable, now reaching LV5 1670/2000. To prevent the opponent from using magic, Rain tore off a piece of rag and stuffed it into Miarko's mouth. At the same time, he tied Miarko's entire body up like a rice dumpling, considering for a moment. Rain then stepped forward and swung his hammer at Miarko's legs for 2 heavy hits. Crack, snap, only to see Miarko, due to the severe pain, his eyes bulging out and his mouth wooing as if trying to shout something. But at this moment, he could only endure it all by himself. Rain looked at Miarko's knees, now severely twisted and deformed, and nodded in satisfaction. The opponent was indeed capable of running. This back and forth had probably wasted at least half an hour of his time. However, capturing such a high-value target was overall very worthwhile. Holding the rope in hand, Rain jumped onto his horse, dragging Miarko along as he sped towards the meeting place he had agreed upon with Mary. As for why he didn't carry Miarko on the back of the saddle, it was mainly because Rain considered the weird tactics of the cultists. Letting the opponent be too close always bore certain risks. Maintaining a certain safety distance was indeed necessary. On the side of the task force's carriage, a green bird descended from the sky and circled around Vinica several times. Vinica immediately brightened her eyes and turned her head, saying, "Major Mary, a group of people are approaching us fast. It looks like a battle is unavoidable." A group of people? What did Green Emerald say? Mary couldn't help but change her expression. Clearly, if Green Emerald issued a warning, it definitely was not an ordinary merchant caravan. Green Emerald said many, fast, and there are bows. In that case, I'll send White Seagull to have a look. Vinica uttered a spell, and immediately 2 white seagulls flew rapidly towards the direction warned by Green Emerald. Half a minute later, suddenly, Vinica's expression changed, and she exclaimed, "One of my white seagulls has been shot dead. No, now 2 of them." Although the white seagulls were not Vinica's contract animals and their death didn't affect her, their demise, having been her close companions, still infuriated her. Meanwhile, Mary seemed to have thought of something. 2 white seagulls shot dead, skilled in archery. Could it be that guy? Mary's pretty face suddenly became stern, and she immediately issued an order saying, "All units on alert, enemy incoming, it's very likely." At that moment, a group appeared around the corner of the road, with the leader being a one-eyed man carrying an exaggeratedly large bow, followed by more than 20 stout men on horses. It is indeed the bloody shooter Phil Kraz. This is bad. Mary frowned tightly. However, Vinica next to her did not think so, instead showing slight excitement as she said, "This is the bloody shooter. I didn't go looking for him, but he came right to our doorstep. And he killed my white seagulls." Without waiting for Mary to say anything, Vinica uttered a spell, and suddenly from the distance, a giant white snowy owl with a body size almost that of an adult, excluding its wings, flew in. And the next second, as Vinica pointed with her wand at the target, a pale blue halo began to appear around the giant white snowy owl. "Big White, take him down." Vinica's twin ponytails bounced as she crisply shouted. Chirp, the witchcraft-empowered giant white snowy owl chirped joyfully, and immediately rushed towards the distant bloody shooter Phil Kraz. And Phil Kraz, upon seeing the huge and clearly extraordinary white owl, startled at first and intended to turn around and leave. However, he quickly calmed down and muttered to himself, "No, it doesn't seem to be a wizard." As an archer with excellent vision, just as he turned the corner, his gaze swiftly swept over the convoy where Mary and her companions were. He quickly disregarded the line of cavalry, but the presence of the 2 women by the carriage caught his attention. It was initially because they were young and beautiful, but now, seeing the giant white owl shimmering with a faint blue glow, this method of dealing with him, an archer, didn't seem very wizard-like. Simply put, an experienced wizard or wizard apprentice, upon seeing his large bow, would have a mature set of tactics for dealing with a ranged archer, like casting a slow curse or witchcraft involving mists, etc. But most likely it wouldn't be like this, casting protective spells on one's contracted creature first rather than on oneself. Consequently, Phil Kraz, thinking of the young faces of the 2 women and combining the 2 pieces of information, guessed that they probably weren't official wizards, not even experienced wizard apprentices. So what was there to be afraid of? If that was the case, then the strength of this modified creature might not be strong. He immediately drew an arrow, knocked it to his bow, and aimed at the white owl, shooting at it. Whoosh! A steel arrow, accompanied by a piercing sound, was shot towards the wing of the giant white owl. With his extensive combat experience, Phil Kraz knew that when facing a bird, if one wasn't sure about hitting the body, aiming for the larger wings was sometimes a wise decision. Once a bird's wings were injured, their flying speed would inevitably be drastically affected, or they might even become sitting ducks. Bang! The giant white owl flapped its wings hard. A pale blue membranous glow briefly brightened, and the high-speed steel arrow was deflected away. But Phil Kraz started to smile. Indeed, as expected. Creation or contracted creature of an official wizard would definitely not be this weak, because he keenly noticed a small red spot had appeared on the pristine white wing of the owl. Clearly, the protective witchcraft couldn't fully negate the damage from his arrow. Though the damage was negligible, he hadn't even used his full strength. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. His fingers moved as if playing the piano, continuously drawing and firing arrows rapidly without pause, so fast that the movements of his hands, drawing and shooting the arrows, were barely visible, blurring into an indistinct flurry of motion. And one after another, the heavy-duty steel arrows shot towards the giant white owl like bullets. Tusk, tusk, that's the boss's secret archery technique, rapid fire. Those Black Sail pirates, who were initially scared by the sudden attack from the sky, were now reassured and excitedly spoke as they saw their boss showing off his power. Yeah, for so long, I haven't seen anyone who can completely withstand it. Even those twin hammer shield knights from Fishing Port Town got injured. Another pirate commented admiringly. What Phil Kraz had just used was exactly his secret archery technique, rapid fire. Bang, bang, bang. His accuracy was remarkable. Although the owl, Big White, tried to dodge desperately. Its massive size meant that it became an easy target for the barrage of arrows unleashed by the rapid fire. This caused Big White's pale blue protective glow to flicker repeatedly, pushing its defenses to some kind of limit. Phil Kraz's expression became stern, and a faint blood-red glow emanated from his body, with veins on his skin becoming prominently distended, presenting a frightening sight. And the bowstring in his hand was drawn to its utmost tension. On the steel arrow he now held, crisscrossing blood-red lines abruptly materialized. With a whistle sound, the blood-red steel arrow shot out at a remarkably high speed towards the giant white owl. In midair, there it is, the boss's blood fury strike. Such a rare sight. I heard this move takes a lot out of him. The boss doesn't like to use it much. The pirates, witnessing their vice-captain's impressive show of strength, cheered and shouted in support. Thwack, in an instant, a flash of blood-red lightning pierced through the pale blue watery film's protection, hitting Big White's wing and zipped out with a trail of fresh blood. The sudden pain made Big White cry out, and it immediately turned to fly back towards Vinica by the carriage. Despite its large size, the owl wasn't old. It was still in its adolescent years. It had never faced such a formidable opponent before, leading to it being intimidated by the enemy's momentum and hastily fleeing. This caused Phil Kraz to laugh triumphantly. Just now, he had used his trump card Blood Fury strike, expending a portion of his own blood to deliver a strike far exceeding his normal strength. The attack was harsh on his body, which is why he didn't like to use it normally, but he had a feeling that the two beautiful women opposite were not simple, possibly big fish, and from the recent engagement, it was evident that one of them was merely a wizard apprentice, likely a novice, inexperienced in battling an archer like him. Additionally, from the seagulls earlier to the giant white owl now, it seemed that all the witchcraft the opponent was skilled with related to controlling birds, which was completely countered by one's own ability. Charge, capture those two women alive, kill all the men. Phil Kraz waved his hand grandly, laughing with satisfaction. Instantly, a group of elite pirates roared with laughter as they raised their weapons and rushed towards the carriage where the two women were. Vinica turned pale upon seeing this, as she would have been fine if Dai-Bai only got hurt, but she feared the enormous emotional toll it would take on her if Dai-Bai died in the battle. Now, as she saw the pirates storming towards her with raging momentum, a wave of panic washed over her unreasonably. Is this what real battle is? It was vastly different from the one-on-one, more instructional battle she had experienced before. Mary immediately cried out, "Everyone dismount, move behind the carriage, form a defensive stance to resist." The 12-person squad, truly elite naval forces, led by 2 official knights and 10 cavalrymen, reacted swiftly. 4 armed with swords and shields reached the front while another 4 drew arrows to shoot, with the others ready for action. "Quick, Vinica, ask Lord Rini for reinforcements." Mary quickly turned to Vinica. "Okay." Vinica swiftly regained her composure and began transmitting messages using witchcraft. Meanwhile, Phil Kraz leisurely drew a steel arrow, aimed at a figure behind the distant carriage, and took aim. As Rini was rapidly heading towards the Special Forces team, suddenly, a seagull in the sky cried out sadly twice, then swiftly spiraled down towards Rini and circled twice. Master, danger, Bo. Companion, 2, dead. HM, upon receiving these fragments of consciousness, Rini was momentarily stunned. But he quickly realized that the Special Forces team must have encountered a formidable enemy. Could it be that the Special Forces team also encountered the Sea God sect? Immediately, Rini flicked the reins and swiftly maneuvered Black Pearl toward the direction of the team, galloping at full speed. This greatly troubled the dragged Miyako of the Sea God sect behind him. Despite his tough hide, Miyako was not lightly wounded, and his wounds had only begun to heal prospectively. However, with Rini's sudden acceleration, the jolting increased significantly, causing the initially healed wounds to burst open again. Damn it, why did this bastard suddenly speed up? Miyako couldn't help but curse internally. Next to the Special Forces team's carriage, a pale blue dome-shaped barrier had risen. It was an effect of a sorcery scroll used by Vinica. A group of pirates, under the command of their deputy leader, were furiously chopping at the barrier. Inside the barrier, 5 or so cavalrymen wielding swords and shields were either pierced by steel arrows through the chest or had their shields torn and their arms hit, resulting in serious injuries. Naturally, only Phil Kraz, nicknamed the Bloodshooter, could inflict such injuries with a single arrow. He looked leisurely at the people inside the pale blue barrier and said, "Although witchcraft is quite magical, even witchcraft has a duration or a capacity limit, and it cannot last indefinitely. How much longer can this barrier protect you?" Gazing at Phil Kraz's smug expression, Vinica couldn't help but angrily say to Major Mary, "Why won't you let me use the Tomb of Water scroll? If I used it, this blood shooter would surely die without a doubt." Vinica, seeing the injured die by and the equally severely wounded members of the Special Forces team, felt a slight twinge of self-reproach. "Vinica, your Tomb of Water scroll is our last resort. Even Master Annius had to pay a significant price to create it. It's too precious. Enough time has passed by now, considering Lord Rini's speed, he should be arriving soon. If it really becomes too late, then using it wouldn't be too late," Mary said calmly. Although they were at a disadvantage now, it was absolutely impossible for the opposition to break through the water barrier in a short period. Once Rini arrived, the odds of victory would undoubtedly reverse. Somehow, Mary felt a special sense of reliability about Rini deep in her heart. Just as Phil Kraz thought he had the upper hand, he heard the rhythmic sound of hooves from behind. This sound of hooves was more muted and heavy than usual, as if carrying something heavy, and along with the sound of hooves, there was also a hissing friction noise. He immediately turned around and saw a large black warhorse carrying a knight appear at the end of the road. Once the knight saw them, he charged towards them, but strangely he was also holding a rope, seemingly dragging a humanoid object. Just as Phil Kraz turned to look at Rini, the two women also saw the distant arrival of Rini and couldn't help but show great joy. "Everyone, hold on a bit longer, Lord Rini is here." Mary couldn't help but show her joy. Although she had just reassured everyone with a steady demeanor, her heart was actually quite nervous. Now seeing Rini appear, she involuntarily breathed a sigh of relief, feeling as though with Rini there, the enemy in front of them was nothing to fear. Meanwhile, Rini on horseback merely glanced and understood what was happening. It turned out that Phil Kraz, the notorious blood shooter they had been searching for, had unexpectedly appeared here with the Special Forces team. Moreover, Vinica's witchcraft seemed to be exactly counteracted by the enemy, rendering the scene rather chaotic, as a group of people all took refuge behind this pale blue water membrane barrier. From the bloodstains on the ground, it appeared that quite a few cavaliers were already injured. In addition, there's an upper limit to the endurance of witchcraft. Therefore, Rain needed to break the stalemate quickly. At first, Phil Kraz had not considered Rain a formidable opponent, thinking he might just be a lone knight. Suddenly witnessing this scene, he came over to do a good deed. Just as he was about to tell the other party to mind his own business, Phil Kraz's expression changed slightly after clearly seeing the water membrane knight's suit Rhine was wearing. Because such expensive knight's gear was definitely not something a lone knight could afford, indicating that the other party was likely a noble knight or held an official position in the Empire. Hence, it was highly probable that there was some sort of connection between the other party and this group of people here. So, Phil Kraz immediately scrutinized Rain more seriously, and when he recognized the person Rain was dragging on the ground, his face drastically changed. All he could do was rub his eyes and stare. Fuck, isn't that the Sea God Sect's envoy Miarco? He couldn't help but curse aloud. Yes, it was him. He had just met with him 2 hours ago. Although the other party was in terrible shape now, with a face swollen like a pig's head, there was absolutely no mistake. Observing Miarco, who was tied up and nearly at death's door, Phil Kraz's eyelids twitched violently and his pupils contracted. It seemed that the opponent was very strong. Miarco had been beaten to such a state. Thus, when Rain dismounted his warhorse, drew the dual-handed greatsword from his back, and walked step by step towards them, Phil Kraz instantly experienced a sinking feeling. Immediately, he couldn't contain himself and began shooting at Rain. Swish, 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 rapid fire. In a matter of seconds, the 20 special steel arrows in the quiver strapped to Phil Kraz's waist were all fired in rapid succession. Seeing the incoming steel arrows, almost forming a continuous line, Rain was slightly taken aback. He hadn't expected the bloodthirsty shooter's archery to be at such a level. It was truly astounding. Unfortunately, he didn't have a shield right now which would have easily warded off the attack. Now it was going to be a bit more troublesome. Swoosh! Rain immediately began dodging the attack at high speed, but the arrows were too fast and frequent, making some impossible to avoid, and he started slashing at them. Clang clang! After deflecting 2 steel arrows, Rain barely dodged the secret technique. Swish! Rain quickly charged towards Phil Kraz. If he only relied on the greatsword for defense, it would only be a matter of time before he faltered. Only offense could serve as the best defense. Blood Fury Strike. Phil Kraz once again unleashed this signature move. In the past, he would think long and hard before using it because each time he performed this attack, it would take him half a month to recover to his peak condition. But ever since he attended a Sea God Sect prayer, he had been granted a strand of the Sea God's power. The Sea God's power could negate the side effects of his attack at least 3 times. Basically, the higher-ups of large pirate groups all received numerous benefits from the Sea God Sect, while the smaller pirate groups did not enjoy such treatment. Instead, they got more stick than carrot. Otherwise, the unruly pirates would not listen to the Sea God Sect so obediently. Under the policy of both carrot and stick, the pirates in this region were almost entirely unified by the Sea God Sect. Facing the swiftly approaching Crimson Arrow, Rain's level 3 danger perception issued a strong warning. Clearly, this shot possessed enough force to pose a severe threat to Rain. Defensive technique. Rain very rarely used the only defensive move of the giant bear sword technique. Plunging the greatsword heavily into the ground, countering the bloodthirsty shooter's attack with the thick spine of the sword wide as a palm. Clang! The blood-colored arrow, as if alive, hammered hard on the greatsword, drilling fiercely at the spine of the glimmering greatsword suspended in mid-air. The force was so immense that it pushed Rain back a step. However, regardless, Rain had stoutly blocked the enemy's killer arrow. It was just the rice-sized dent that appeared on the spine of the glimmering greatsword that left Rain feeling distressed. Seeing that even his strongest attack did not vex Rain, Phil Kraz felt a sudden chill in his heart. Then he quickly glanced at the Sea God Sect's envoy, tied up like a zongzi next to the tall black warhorse. Phil Kraz knew that he couldn't rescue him this time. Moreover, if he did not want to end up like him, he needed to retreat immediately. So, without the slightest hesitation, Phil Kraz once again shot several arrows rapidly at Rain, and then retreated swiftly towards the back. The pirates who had come with Phil Kraz were left somewhat speechless, exchanging glances. They couldn't make heads or tails of the situation, because the battle between their deputy leader, Phil Kraz, and this suddenly emerging stranger knight had lasted less than 10 seconds. In their eyes, the outcome was completely undecided. As a result, their own deputy head, nicknamed Bloodshooter Phil Kraz, started to retreat. Damn it, you sell out your own people. If you run, what about your brothers? The Naval Special Forces team members, upon seeing this scene, were instantly invigorated, nearly bursting into cheers. The uninjured 7 or 8 people quickly emerged from behind the pale blue water membrane and began to coordinate with Rain in a counterattack. Just now they had been suppressed for quite a long time. A group of people pinned down by just one man, Bloodshooter Phil Kraz. Now they felt relieved. Rain shouted to Mary from afar, "That one, being dragged behind the black horse, is a Sea God Sect messenger." In the midst of everyone's stunned gazes, he shot forward like an arrow leaving the bowstring, chasing after Phil Kraz with great speed. Hearing Rain's words, Mary was clearly startled. She turned her head with a touch of confusion and asked Vinica beside her for confirmation. "Vinica, did you clearly hear what Lord Rain just said? Is he saying that the one being dragged behind the black horse is a messenger from the Sea God sect?" Mary pointed in the direction of the black horse. And Vinica's expression was just as shocked. Her beautiful eyes blinked a few times. She also looked at Mary and nodded. "If I heard correctly, I think that's exactly what Lord Rain just said." Thus, the slightly excited pair quickly approached the Sea God sect envoy to investigate. Indeed, after Vinica cast a witchcraft evil detection, the intense evil pseudo-divine power emanating from the other party immediately confirmed his identity. In an instant, the two women realized that everything Rain had just said was true. He had really captured a messenger from the Sea God sect. This revelation exhilarated both Mary and Vinica. Their mission was to find potential bases of the Sea God sect and the various pirate groups through the pirates that had landed, to facilitate targeted elimination by the Empire's southern fleets. But they hadn't expected that pirate leader, who they thought would take a meticulous plan and a long time to capture, would be caught so quickly. And it wasn't just any pirate leader, but a higher-ranking envoy from the Sea God sect. Not only had they achieved their goal in one step, but they had also exceeded it. This unexpected joy made both women overjoyed. At this moment, Mary also recalled that earlier Rain had pursued an enemy while dealing with the fourth location. It must have been the Sea God sect messenger before them. So this was the big fish indeed. And Vinica, watching bloodshooter Phil Kraz, seemed to have thought of something. She immediately cast a kind of witchcraft, summoning flocks of white seagulls and green birds, and sent them chasing after him. The birds' positioning, it not only facilitated Lord Rain's search, but also allowed for critical moments of distraction. "Bloodshooter Phil Kraz, you shot my great white. This time, Lord Rain will surely deal with you properly." Vinica couldn't help feeling secretly delighted, and Bloodshooter Phil Kraz regretted deeply at this moment. Damn it, those stupid birds in the sky really messed things up, revealing his trail in the forest without a doubt. If he had known, he would have shot all those birds down from the beginning. Rain, following the guidance of the white seagulls and green birds, quickly approached Phil Kraz. The closer they got, the closer they approached each other. Suddenly, 7 or 8 white seagulls and green birds, unafraid of danger, swooped towards Phil Kraz's head, causing him a flurry of panic and forcing him to fend for himself. Rain certainly seized this perfect opportunity. With a quick stride, he reached Phil Kraz's rear. A long glint of cold light flashed. A minute later, Rain dragged bloodshooter Phil Kraz, limp as a dead dog, back to the side of the carriage and flung him heavily next to the Sea God sect messenger Miarco. At that moment, the half-dead Miarco opened his eyes. And the next second, his eyes suddenly widened. Damn it, how could it be Phil Kraz? Could it be that he was also? Phil Kraz and Miarco, two brothers in misfortune, exchanged a deep look, seeing in each other's eyes a sense of helplessness and despair. Damn it, who could have imagined this? 2 hours ago, they were eagerly discussing their follow-up plans, filled with confidence for the future, but 2 hours later, they both ended up as prisoners to a young man. This change was simply too fast. Fast enough that anyone would struggle to accept it. And Vinica was using a pair of bright, sparkling beautiful eyes to size up Riani, as if she were getting to know him again. "Baron Riani, your combat prowess feels stronger than even a great knight. No, it's even stronger than an ordinary level 3 wizard apprentice. Major Mary had mentioned you before, and I thought there must have been a bit of exaggeration in it, but now it seems there was no exaggeration, and even that was an understatement." Riani smiled slightly and said, "Miss Vinica, in terms of true combat power, I should be no match for you. Level 3 wizard apprentice with a sorcery scroll, even a great knight would not be able to resist. It's just that for these two, I might not have any weaknesses they could target, so dealing with them is relatively easier," Riani said, gesturing toward the two people lying on the ground. Lord Riani, excessive modesty is pride in itself. Major Mary, who had overheard their conversation, said with a smile as she walked over to Riani. Although she had personally witnessed Riani's battle prowess during his knighthood examination, 2 months had passed, and Riani's strength had significantly improved once again. The obstacles that were extremely difficult for ordinary knights seemed to be completely inapplicable to Riani. Originally, Major Mary had thought that the combat responsibility among their group would fall on Vinica, the level 3 wizard apprentice, but now it was clear that Riani was the one. Yes, Lord Rieni, right? I also want to thank you for taking revenge for my Big White. Vinica stroked the giant white owl almost as tall as her and curtsied to Rieni as a lady should. Oh, Big White got hurt. Rieni inspected Big White's wounded wing closely, which must have been injured by Phil Kraz's signature skill, Blood Fury Strike, because a faint blood-colored aura still lingered. Hoot hoot. Big White hooted at Rieni twice in a very human manner. Then, mimicking Vinica's curtsy, it opened its wings slightly as a gesture of thanks to Rieni. Yes, this is my contract beast Big White. A modified white owl. Baron Rieni, Big White says it is very grateful to you for avenging it. Vinica said with a smile. Well, no need to thank me, Big White, it's what I should do. Rieni gauged Big White, assessing from its aura that this giant white owl Big White was likely not inferior to a seasoned knight. If pitted against an opponent other than Phil Kraz, who was extremely skilled in archery, the combination of Vinica and Big White would likely easily overpower the adversary. Big White would be the tank in the front line, with Vinica providing witchcraft support from behind. By the way, Lord Rieni, I think we should find a safe place now to properly interrogate these two. Major Mary indicated the two disheartened men on the ground with a slender white finger. Of course, let's head to Fishing Port Town now. The interrogation of these two is likely not something we can wrap up quickly. The town hall there should have detention rooms, which will be more convenient for interrogation. Rieni nodded. With the right interrogation techniques, they should be able to excavate many secrets about the Sea God sect and the Black Sail pirates from these two. However, Major Mary, these two are tough nuts to crack. If we stick to usual interrogation methods, they might not yield significant results. Rieni glanced at Flotto Knight as he cautioned Mary. Cultists indeed, they're not ordinary. Miss Vinica, we might need to trouble you for your witchcraft when the time comes. Mary said with a serious expression, knowing Rieni's worries were not unfounded. Flotto Knight's interrogation techniques might be formidable against ordinary pirates, but they might not be sufficient for these two. She still needs to think of a strategy. Of course, Major Mary can come to me anytime. I have some truth serum here, which should be quite effective. Vinica nodded. After cleaning up the battlefield, the cavalry took charge of escorting Phil Kraz and Mjarko, the two important figures, towards Fishing Port Town. About a quarter of an hour later, the dense rows of houses in Fishing Port Town were already clearly visible. But eerily, the pedestrians by the road were still few and far between. Rieni squinted and looked into the distance carefully, noticing that many of the houses on the outskirts of the town had collapsed, as if they had been through intense fighting. On reflection, it was possible that the pirates had already possessed the strength to take over Fishing Port Town, but had refrained from doing so to avoid the attention of the Empire's higher echelons, or for other reasons. Therefore, they had focused on plundering the town instead. Soon, Rieni and his party came upon a makeshift barricade set up on the street. Security officers on guard, looking at Rieni and his group warily. Halt, who are you? As their identities as part of the naval task force was sensitive, the cavalry did not disclose their own identities, but instead introduced Rieni's. This gentleman is the newly appointed governor and chief of security of Fishing Port Town, Baron Rieni. We are his escorts. Baron Rieni. The security officers immediately looked at each other in confusion. They were not aware of this news. But soon someone caught on and said, Baron Knights, we have not received any notification about the situation you mentioned. Given the recent pirate infestation, please wait a moment while we immediately report this upwards. A security officer quickly ran toward the administrative hall in the center of the town. After a few minutes, several cavalry members from the front row of Rain's team told the security officers, move these roadblocks for now. The pirates should not launch another attack soon. Is there any new situation? Having observed for a few minutes, the security officers could basically confirm that those in front of them were unlikely to be pirates, as the dozen cavalry members, despite being somewhat injured, were all relatively young and handsome with pearly white teeth. Two cavalry members looked at each other and smiled. One of them turned to the officers and said, for this, you should thank Baron Rain, as he has cleared out the pirates that were entrenched on the roads leading in and out of your town. By the way, we also caught 2 big fish. What? Is Baron Rain that impressive? The pirates on a few of the roads into our town are members of the significant pirate group, Black Sail. They are very strong. The security officers were extremely surprised upon hearing this news and soon started whispering amongst themselves. Of course, The cavalrymen patted the saddlebags on their horses and showed the items they had seized. Upon seeing these, the security officers immediately recognized them as weapons and some iconic items from the pirates, such as the black sail pirate skull bandanas and the like. In the course of their exchange, the security officers began to follow the cavalry's advice and started moving the roadblocks. At this moment, two burly men with bandages wrapped around them and wielding hammers and shields approached. Both men were family knights of Count Habs with the strength of senior knights and were skilled in using hammer and shield. Judging by the clear bandage marks on their bodies, as the primary defensive force of Fishing Port Town, they had been under considerable pressure. Upon seeing the Riemann brothers approaching, Rain, who was inside the carriage, said to the two women, "Major Mary Miss Vinica, please have a seat for a moment. I'll go coordinate." "Of course, Baron Rain." The two women immediately nodded. Given their special status, coordinating the territorial work was naturally most suitable for Rain. When the Riemann brothers saw how young Rain was, they couldn't help but be stunned, and Cornet Riemann quickly said, "Are you Baron Rain? You're quite young. How could the Earl send such a young knight here? Although your team of cavalry appears elite, do you know that half of the 20 elite members I previously led have been killed or injured? It was not easy to hold the current situation." Since the Riemann brothers had been dispatched to Fishing Port Town before the bloody duel between Rain and Baron Norman, they were relatively uninformed. They were unaware that Rain had a record of a bloody duel with the great knight, let alone that he had just captured the bloody shooter Phil Kraz and the emissary of the Sea God sect, Miarco. However, at that moment, after Cobert Riemann took a careful look at Rain, he tugged at his brother's hand and said, "I believe in him." The younger brother looked puzzledly at his elder brother, Cobert Riemann, who then pointed to the large bow hanging on the side of the black horse and asked, "Does this bow look familiar?" The brother took a closer look and exclaimed, "Isn't that the bow of bloody shooter Phil Kraz? Why would it be in his possession? Could it be?" Of course, Cornet Riemann was very familiar with this bow. It was because of this bow that he and his brother had been injured, and they had not yet fully recovered. At this time, a member of the specialized cavalry squad could not hold back any longer and blurted out, "The bloody shooter, that guy, is right behind us." Upon hearing this, the Riemann brothers immediately looked at each other in shock. Seizing weapons and capturing a leader were, of course, two different concepts. The bloody shooter, whom they viewed as a formidable enemy, was surprisingly handled by the new governor on the way to Fishing Port Town, even before his official arrival. Such capability. The subsequent events proceeded smoothly. Rain and his group was soon taken to the town's administrative hall. The Riemann brothers quickly aligned their attitudes and swiftly reported to Rain about the events that had occurred in Fishing Port Town during their half-month deployment. This allowed Rain to quickly get first-hand information about the current situation in Fishing Port Town. Initially, after the Riemann brothers had completed the handover with Rain, they were supposed to return to County Town, but upon seeing the cavalry escorting Phil Kraz into the interrogation room, they changed their minds. Especially after the brothers heard Mary mention that she would contact the South Sea Fleet to send interrogation specialists. They patted their chests and said, "We are professionals at this. Even the prison sometimes calls us in for inmates they can't handle." Upon hearing this, Rain found it to be a boon. There was no need to wait for the Navy to dispatch interrogation personnel. Thus, he had Mary commission Flotto Knight and the two brothers to begin interrogating the prisoner. In the time following, Rain stuck to the established schedule, practicing meditation and witchcraft daily in the administrative hall. Based on the current progress, he would only need another 7 to 8 days to advance from Wizard Apprentice to Level 6. However, Rain did not devote all his time and energy to his training. Every day, the White Seagulls of Vinica would scatter to conduct reconnaissance work. Whenever they spotted pirate landing boats or pirate groups numbering more than 10, Rain would personally set out to eliminate them. Of course, if there are few pirates, it will be handled by the Navy's Special Task Force. Therefore, with the help of birds for enemy detection, in just a few days, the pirates near Fishing Port Town were nearly extinct. The residents of Fishing Port Town slowly started to return to their normal lives. This could be seen from the gradually increasing smiles on the faces of the residents. Moreover, as the governor and sheriff of Fishing Port Town, Rain led a team of cavalry around Fishing Port Town every day. Although this action was more of a formality and symbolic, it greatly restored the town residents' confidence in the Empire's ability to eradicate pirates. Even though fishing Port Town could not yet resume normal fishing operations and restore normal fishery production, security had been completely rejuvenated, and the previous arrogance of the pirates had been effectively curbed. However, for Rain, what was most important was that he had steadily improved his Kadar martial arts through practice and by killing pirates. 3 days later, after clearing a small group of pirates who had landed, Rain finally received the system prompt that his Kadar martial arts had improved. Your skill Kadar martial arts has improved. Experience plus 59. You have gone through a combat, Knight, Transcendent. Profession experience points plus 16. Congratulations! Your skill Kadar martial arts has advanced to LV6. Instantly, Rain's mind was filled with fragmented training memories about Kadar martial arts. After absorbing and digesting them, Rain felt as if he had been practicing Kadar martial arts for half a year. But just as Rain had regained his senses, he realized that the system prompt was not over yet. Another system prompt followed. Congratulations, you have unlocked the exclusive secret technique of Kadar martial arts, high-speed combo. Indeed, generally speaking, once the control level of an extraordinary battle technique reaches mastery, secret techniques start to be unlocked. Delighted, Rain saw a brand new icon located above Kadar martial arts on the Knight, Transcendent. Attribute panel. The icon depicted a burly man swinging his fists forward rapidly, with dozens of fist shadows in front of him, looking vivid and fiercely powerful. In the lower right corner of the icon, there was a line of small text. High-speed combo LV1 secret technique effect. Explodes in an extremely short time to deliver as many punching attacks as possible, including left swing fist, right swing fist, and uppercut. Note: high-speed combo is a secret technique and cannot be improved directly through skill points. High-speed combo LV2 requires the following conditions: 1. Kadar martial arts LV8 or higher. 2. Strength 16 or higher, Constitution 16 or higher, Agility 18 or higher. Rain tested it. With his Knight plate gauntlets, he could roughly strike 12 punches per second. Without the plate gauntlets and shoulder armor, he could reach 14 punches per second. This made Rain quite pleased, as he now had another close combat trump card. His original weapons, whether the greatsword or the two-handed warhammer, were both over 1.5 meters in length, making them very inconvenient in narrow environments. This was clearly a notable weakness of his, since both the Tokkul hammer technique and giant bear sword technique had reached the master level of control. His combat power was greatly reduced without these handy weapons. This was vividly demonstrated during the battle with the sea god sex messenger Myarko in the cave. Looking at the triggering conditions for the secret technique high-speed combo LV2, Rain pondered briefly before deciding to add points continuously right away. Raising Kadar martial arts from LV6 to LV7 was not something that could be done in a short period, and in about 3 to 4 days' time, his wizard apprentice, Transcendent profession level, would reach LV6. At that time, he could raise Kadar martial arts to LV10, satisfying all the requirements for the transition to Weapon Master, Legendary. So now, he planned to first apply these 3 remaining skill points to advance Kadar martial arts to LV9. This way, he could get used to it first. Furthermore, Kadar martial arts LV9 would inevitably trigger another martial arts secret technique 100 Crack Strike, which Rain was quite anticipating. As the remaining skill points on the attribute panel went from 3 to 0, Kadar martial arts suddenly jumped from LV6 to LV9. A surge of Kadar martial arts training memories flooded in, and multiple system prompts also appeared. Ding! Has been detected that the host's Kadar martial arts has achieved LV7. Unlocking the exclusive secret technique for Kadar martial arts, 100 Crack Strike LV1. 100 Crack Strike LV1, secret technique, effect. Imitating the tiger's claws, transforming fists into claws, and unleashing a burst of strikes such as upward slashes, downward chops, and left-right swings to deliver as many claw attacks as possible in an extremely short time. Note: 100 Crack Strike is a secret technique and cannot be improved directly through skill points. Note: only effective when equipped with Finger Tiger. 100 Crack Strike LV2 requires the following conditions: 1. Kadar martial arts LV9 or higher. 2. Strength 18 or higher, Constitution 16 or higher, Agility 18 or higher. Ding! It has been detected that the host's Kadar martial arts has achieved LV8, unlocking the exclusive secret technique for Kadar martial arts, high-speed combo LV2. Ding, it has been detected that the host's Kadar martial arts has achieved LV9, unlocking the exclusive secret technique for Kadar martial arts, 100 crack strike LV2. On the fourth day, Rain's brothers came to report. Previously, with the help of the truth serum provided by Vinica, they had exerted a substantial effort and finally made the other party confess some secret information, which they confirmed over 2 days of repeated verification. Vinica immediately used seagulls to relay the location of the Sea God Sect's stronghold near the Minster County Sea area, as well as the locations of several major pirate group strongholds to the Empire's South Sea Fleet. Next, it was a waiting game. After all, sea battles were not within the scope of this naval task force and Rain's mission. That was left to the South Sea Fleet and Major General Zilva and their companions. Soon, Rain and his team received a response from the fleet. Major General Zilva instructed Rain and the task force to be prepared for coastal defense as the pirates, if heavily damaged by the Imperial fleet during the naval battle, might become desperate and flee directly to the coastal areas. Though these were a ragtag bunch, they were formidable enemies for the coastal towns with weaker defenses. A breach would result in extremely heavy losses. On the fifth day, the Riaman brothers came to report once again. Baron, this is what we found hidden in the cracks of Phil Kraz's breastplate armor, believed to be a quarter of the treasure map of the Pirate King, shipburner Vincent Sanborn. Unfortunately, it's not complete. It's just 1/4, they said. Rain's heart leapt with joy as he immediately took the parchment and examined it closely. From the texture and patterns, this was indeed the missing final quarter of the treasure map. A quarter was still fine, but who wouldn't be envious of a complete treasure map? After the two brothers left, Rain quickly took out the remaining 3 parts of the map and began to piece them together. When a complete treasure map lay before Rain, he found that the center of the map showed a ring of islands composed of multiple islets. However, the marked spot with an X was not on the ring of islands, but on a small island adjacent to it. Clearly, the small island beside it was the destination and the location of the treasure. After pondering for a while, Rain decided not to consult Major Mary or Vinica about the location depicted on the treasure map. Through his time spent getting to know Fishing Port Town, Rain learned that the town was home to an old man who had once been a captain of an ocean-going merchant ship, Captain Cashin, whom he planned to consult. After crudely drawing a copy of the treasure map, Rain found Captain Cashin, an old man with a pipe in his mouth and white in his hair. Baron, this ring-shaped chain of islands on the necklace here, judging from the number and shape of the islands, looks very much like the Saphira Islands located in the outer sea, he said. And this island is just to the east of the Saphira Islands. If I'm not mistaken, this should be the Island of Fear. The Island of Fear. Upon hearing this name, Rain couldn't help but frown slightly. From the name alone, it was evident that this was not some simple island. Indeed, the reason why this island is called the Island of Fear is that it's infested with a group of Tricephalus sea hydrolizards. Captain Cashin nodded, speaking with a grave expression. Tricephalus sea hydrolizards, are they some kind of vicious beasts? Rain couldn't help but ask. Rain had not encountered such fierce beasts before, but could tell from Captain Cashin's slightly fearful demeanor that these creatures must be formidable. Exactly. Tricephalus sea hydrolizard are indeed extremely powerful vicious beasts. Every adult specimen is as strong as a veteran great knight, and the leader of the Tricephalus sea hydrolizards is said to have the strength of a peak knight, he explained. In the past, pirates who encountered a hurricane and whose ship was destroyed, leaving them washed up on the Island of Fear, met a dire fate. Over 100 pirates, with only one escaping alive clinging to a plank, the rest were all devoured by the Tricephalus sea hydrolizards. Some incredulous pirates observed the island from a distance afterward, and indeed found it occupied by a large group of Tricephalus sea hydrolizards. This incident quickly spread, and the island was soon marked as a forbidden zone by pirates and oceanic merchant ships. Captain Cashin recounted slowly. Do the adult individuals truly rival the strength of a veteran great knight? There's a large group of them. Indeed, it is worthy of being called the Island of Fear. Rain broke into a cold sweat at the mere thought of stepping onto the island and facing the attacks of more than 10, perhaps even dozens, of sea hydra lizard creatures, each with a strength comparable to that of a veteran great knight. However, Rain then considered another problem. Why would pirate king shipburner Vincent Sanborn choose to hide his treasure on this island? Could it be that Vincent Sanborn, formerly a wizard and a great knight, had some kind of contract with the leader of the three-headed sea hydra lizard clan? Or could it be that Vincent Sanborn, this pirate king, had some sort of witchcraft, such as invisibility, that allowed him to easily conceal his treasures here? After pondering for a moment, Rain shook his head slightly. This question, it seems, could only be answered by the pirate king himself. Another problem was that although Rain had deciphered the secret of the treasure map, the risk of landing on the island with his current strength was far too great. Rain's mind raced as he contemplated various viable strategies. First of all, it wasn't impossible to employ the power of the naval forces. But the issue was that once the South Sea Fleet of the Empire intervened, the nature of the whole matter would change. Although naval officers like Major Zilva of the Sixth Fleet and Lieutenant Colonel Mary had a good impression of him, deploying battleships for the exploration of the Pirate King's treasure would obviously be official business. Putting aside the problems of battle damage should a fight break out, the issue of profit distribution would be problematic. Rain might not necessarily receive what he wanted. Moreover, there could be other problems beyond combat. After all, it's impossible to guarantee that there aren't people with ulterior motives within the Navy. Seeing him obtain the Pirate King's treasure might spark greed. Thus, Rain quickly dismissed the idea of inviting the South Sea Fleet to participate. After some serious contemplation, Rain felt it would be more appropriate to wait until he was capable enough to explore the island on his own, especially since in just under a month's time he was due to go to Minster to participate in the examinations held by the Imperial Sword-Bearer Organization. This matter was naturally of greater importance than the treasure of the Pirate King. Taking Mary's words into account, Rain believed that once he joined the Imperial Sword-Bearer Organization, he would be able to complete a variety of missions, accumulate enough points, and exchange them for witchcraft or other important knowledge. This would significantly increase his strength. This method would be more enduring, reliable, and targeted. The treasure of the Pirate King, in some sense, was more like the icing on the cake. Moreover, he was just about to change his job to Weapon Master, and his Wizard Apprentice job had reached level 3 Wizard Apprentice. Rain believed that once he advanced to a formal wizard, with the enhancement of both legendary professions, he would have the initial capability to explore the island. This time would not be too long. Having thought through these issues, Rain's eagerness for the Pirate King's treasure cooled down from what it had been before. On the 6th day, news came from the naval fleet. At this moment, Major Mary approached the training ground with a smile and joyfully said to Rain, "Lord Rain, the Empire's South Sea Fleet, in conjunction with the seasonal winds and the goddess of the Sea Church, have both achieved decisive victories in the naval battle and the raid on the islands over the past 2 days. Not only did they utterly rout the pirates' joint fleet, but they also destroyed the bases of the Sea God sect and various pirate groups within the nearby waters of Meister County. Currently, the South Sea Fleet and the Goddess Church are in pursuit of the escaping Sea God sect's priests and the high-ranking members of the various pirate groups, most of whom are fleeing towards the open sea. Therefore, I think our task force's mission can be considered officially concluded." Upon hearing this good news, Rain also showed a smile, saying, "It seems that the information we relayed to the fleet did play a significant role." "Exactly, Baron Rain. The 2 prisoners you captured earlier provided crucial intelligence." Hearing Rain's words, Major Mary's smile became even more radiant, revealing her pearly white teeth. Moreover, regarding the witchcraft Enia's bird transformation technique that Lord Rain requested, Major General Zilva has sent a reply. He has consulted the commander of the South Sea Fleet. Your application has been approved. I believe later today, you can contact Vinica to have her teach you the relevant witchcraft. It should be the quickest method. After listening to what Mary had said, Rain couldn't help but feel overjoyed and nodded, saying, "That's wonderful." That is to say, he could now consult Vinica and learn this witchcraft at any time. Of course, this was good news. Once he mastered this witchcraft, he could find a relatively powerful raptor to become his 3rd pet at any time. This way, he could control a certain local battle from a broader perspective. Perhaps it wasn't very beneficial in one-on-one combat, but it was extremely useful in one-to-many, raid scenarios, and so on. Additionally, learning new witchcraft might very likely earn him a sizable amount of Wizard Apprentice Transcendent Professional Experience points. He might even level up his wizard apprentice, Transcendent, to LV6, thereby meeting all the conditions for the class change to Weapon Master, Legendary. Thinking this, Rain couldn't help but feel a bit excited. "Thank you very much, Major Mary," said Rain, looking at the beautiful Major Mary and bowing slightly as a gentleman in gratitude. "Baron Rain, it is I who should thank you. Without the capture of the Sea God Sex Envoy and the deputy leader of the Black Sail Pirates, we do not know when our task force's mission would have been completed," Mary said with a smile, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. After the beautiful Major left, Rain had intended to find Vinica right away, but as soon as he stepped out the door, he encountered the Riemann brothers coming towards him, so Rain returned to his room once more. The Riemann brothers then reported, "Lord Baron, this is the Blood Fury Archery, dictated by Phil Kraz, the Bloody Shooter." Brother Cobert Riemann handed Rain a thin sheepskin scroll that still seemed a bit damp with fresh ink, obviously written not long before, since we don't really understand archery. In case Phil Kraz has done anything tricky within it, we wouldn't be able to detect it, but we think some of the archery techniques are quite meaningful to learn, so we specially brought it for Lord Baron to see. Blood Fury Archery. Rain took it and glanced at the title, feeling quite surprised in his heart. The Riemann brothers' interrogation methods were impressive indeed. They even managed to extract the famous archery skills of Phil Kraz, the Bloody Shooter. As for the Riemann brothers' concerns about Phil Kraz tampering with the archery techniques, Rain wasn't worried about that in the slightest, because the system would automatically help him discern the truth, or rather, whether the techniques were effective combat skills. It's simple. As long as this extraordinary battle technique could be displayed on his profession panel, then it was genuine and he could start to learn it. So, where others might have to spend a lot of effort finding an archery master to validate it or learn it with trepidation, with Rain these problems didn't exist at all. However, if things had reached this extent, then Phil Kraz must have been completely drained by the Riemann brothers. Indeed, Brother Cobert Riemann suggested, "Lord Baron, we think Phil Kraz, the Bloody Shooter, is no longer of much value. Do you think about finding a time to execute him by hanging at the town hall entrance in Fishing Port Town? This way, not only can we boost the morale of the residents of Fishing Port Town, telling them that the Empire can protect their safety, but it can also deter the pirates who always have their eyes on Fishing Port Town," added Brother Cornet Layman. After some thought, Rain nodded and said, "That's fine. Let's proceed with executing Phil Kraz, the Bloody Shooter, these next couple of days." "Very good, Lord Baron. We will arrange it right away." The Riemann brothers naturally harbored deep hatred for Phil Kraz, who had injured them, and they had vented their frustrations during these past days of interrogation. However, they were concerned that if such an expert were to escape, it would be bad news for them, so they strongly advised Rain to execute him. After the Riemann brothers had left, Rain quickly began to peruse the scroll of Blood Fury Archery. Although the teachings originated from Phil Kraz's narration, the script was clear and well written thanks to the scribe who had assisted in transcribing it, making it easy to read. Rain took a quick look and nodded slightly, thinking to himself that it was quite good. The secret techniques Rapid Fire and Blood Fury Strike were both described within, comprising a rather complete set of archery-based extraordinary battle techniques. However, Rain did not plan to study them at the moment. His main concern was to raise his wizard apprentice, Transcendent, level to LV6 as soon as possible, thereby acquiring the final skill point needed for the promotion to Weapon Master, Legendary. Once he succeeded in his class change, he would naturally have plenty of time to learn new extraordinary battle techniques. Now that the threats from the Sea God sect and the pirates had been eliminated, Rain planned to gradually hand over the day-to-day management of Fishing Port Town to the Riemann brothers. Since the brothers had handled most of the town's administrative work before his arrival, the transition was expected to be smooth. Because it was already the final days of the month of White Snow, and they were about to step into the month of Vitality. The selection for the sword bearers of the Empire was scheduled for the last day of the month of Vitality, but since the venue was in the provincial capital, Mingster, Rain needed to reserve at least a week for travel. Thus, by his calculations, he could only stay in Fishing Port Town for about 20 more days. With the pirates' threat no more, there was no real need for him to continue serving as Fishing Port Town's governor. Therefore, Rain was already considering reporting to Count Habs in a couple of days so that the Earl could quickly choose someone suitable to replace him. Rieni thought there was one more thing he needed to do. He walked to the bedroom and took out a pair of arm blades from General Perix of the Zarel Resistance. The arm blades, which he had removed from Perix's arm guards, had caught Rieni's attention due to their being made of some rare metal. Their sharpness and hardness were impressive. He, in particular, needed a pair of bladed knuckles, and hence had planned to use the arm blades to forge into his plate gauntlets, equipping them with a pair of short bladed knuckles. The purpose, of course, was to execute the secret technique of Khadar martial arts, the 100-crack strike. Until today, because Rieni's martial arts level had been consistently low, he had put off this task. However, now that his level of Khadar martial arts had reached LV9 and triggered 100-crack strike LV2, lacking bladed knuckles, relatively speaking, would affect the performance of his martial arts. While Rieni was contemplating, there came another knock at the door. Thump, 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 come in. In came Vinica, wearing a long white dress and smiling brightly. Today she was unusually not wearing a black wizard robe but a one-shoulder-fitting long cashmere dress in white, which outlined her well-developed curves. Her twin ponytails behind her head swayed with youthful vigor. This brightened Rieni's eyes. He had intended to find her, but unexpectedly she came to him first. Moreover, despite Vinica being just 18, her bust was by no means inferior to that of a mature woman, providing both for husband to play with and for children to nurse from. Coupled with her youthful face, she could rival the characters that stepped right out of a comic book from his previous world. Before Rieni could speak, Vinica took the initiative. Lord Rieni, I've come to ask for a favor. Oh, Miss Vinica, please tell me. If I can be of assistance, it would be my honor, Rieni replied with a nod and a smile. Rieni naturally wanted to forge a good relationship with Vinica, who came from a line of wizards. On one hand, he might need her to teach him more of Aeneas' bird transformation technique, and on the other, he hoped to gain more knowledge of witchcraft from her. Giggle, then thank you in advance, Lord Rieni. Vinica couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh coquettishly, her beauty shaking with her laughter. Here's the thing. I'm looking for a type of seabird called iron-beak sea eagle, a kind of predatory bird. You know, the birds I've previously bred or contracted were not birds of prey, and considering my position in the Navy, birds adapted to marine environments were naturally my first choice. Combining the two, I've chosen this species as my new breeding focus. However, I've searched around recently and discovered a small population on an island about a few kilometers southeast of Fishing Port Town. Hearing this, Rieni finally understood why he hadn't seen much of Vinica recently. She had been busy with this matter. Additionally, the iron-beak sea eagle she mentioned piqued his interest. Perhaps he could consider the iron-beak sea eagle as his third pet, but there was no need to rush the decision. He could first accompany Vinica to have a look. Vinica continued, however, I had the seagulls survey that area, and it turns out to be one of the main habitats of the black-gilled fishman, so it might be safer if you, Lord Rieni, could come with me, she explained. Those black-gilled fishmen tend to attack in groups, and some individuals are quite strong, with strength comparable to that of a knight trainee. Very few even possess the strength of a full-fledged knight, which might pose some difficulty for me if I were to go alone. Vinica's bright eyes looked at Rieni as she spoke. Although Vinica had not known Rieni for long, she felt an inexplicable sense of trust toward him. She believed that if Rieni were willing to accompany her, her goal of obtaining the ironbill sea eagle fledgling would definitely be achieved smoothly. Rieni smiled. Of course, Miss Vinica, when might we depart? Since I serve as the governor of Fishing Port Town, I might need a little time to hand over my duties before I can accompany you. Of course, Lord Rieni, you agreed. That's wonderful. Vinica's twin ponytails swung as her face lit up with joy and her pale hands clenched in excitement, clearly delighted that Rieni had agreed to accompany her. Could we leave early tomorrow morning? If all goes well, we ought to be able to make the round trip within the day. As for the vessel, I will make arrangements. Yes, Miss Vinica, that works perfectly, as I also need your assistance with something. Rieni nodded and said with a smile. Oh, please speak, Lord Rieni. Vinica watched Rieni with a slight sense of curiosity. Major Mary just informed me that my application to learn Aeneas' bird transformation technique has been approved by the Southern Fleet. That's great. I understand what you mean. Whenever you are free, Vinica immediately grasped his meaning and volunteered. Now, if possible. Now, Vinica couldn't help but express her surprise. Lord Rieni was indeed in a hurry. Is that inconvenient, Miss Vinica? No, not at all. Please follow me, Lord Rieni. Vinika's petite hands gestured as she spoke. The two walked shoulder to shoulder toward a small alchemy room that Vinika had recently transformed at the town hall. While walking, Vinika explained, "My mentor's bird transformation technique is not purely witchcraft. To be precise, it is a witchcraft ritual that requires some specific materials. Among these, an essential component is either a newly hatched chick or an egg about to hatch." "Can either be used?" Rieni asked casually. "Yes, either can be used, though an egg about to hatch has the best effects. But if the egg contains an unformed embryo, the ritual will inevitably fail, hence, we generally choose a newly hatched chick. Besides, we will need a fast growth potion and phantom spirit grass, and of course, the most important part is drawing the witchcraft circle." Vinika already had a favorable impression of Rieni, and now that she had been officially authorized, she taught with even more dedication and was forthcoming with information. Inside the alchemy room, Vinika personally demonstrated the technique for Rieni to observe, using a white seagull fledgling as the test subject. This was perfect to make up for the ones that had died. During their last experiment, Vinika first placed the fluffy white seagull fledgling on a soft cushion in the center of the room, and then positioned a leaf with purple patterns in front of the fledgling. Having done this, she began grinding a special ink made of a mix of herbs. "Lord Rieni, this is moonlight ink. We'll use it to draw the six-pointed witchcraft circle later," Vinika explained while processing the ink. Such detailed explanation naturally increased Rieni's fondness for Vinika. This was because if he had instead obtained relevant books and had to study on his own, the learning process would definitely not be as efficient. Vinika's hands-on teaching saved Rieni a lot of learning time. After grinding, Vinika started using the pale silver moonlight ink to draw a six-pointed witchcraft circle on the ground. A success on the first try, nice. Vinika's face immediately lit up with a smile. It was best to succeed on the first try, especially in front of Lord Rieni, otherwise it would have been a bit embarrassing. Then came the final step. Vinika took out a bottle of pale green potion and held it in her hand, starting to chant a spell. As the crisp chanting sounded, the six-pointed witchcraft circle began to glow gradually, and a unique aura of witchcraft appeared. The next second, Vinika uncorked the potion bottle, and the pale green liquid, like a living thing, surged out from the bottle, coiling around the white fledgling. As Vinika pointed toward the pale purple leaf, the ritual neared its conclusion. The fledgling, the potion, and the leaf underwent a miraculous reaction. Suddenly, multiple system notifications appeared. "You have focused on observing Enia's bird transformation technique, understanding enhanced. You have grasped a new skill, Enia's bird transformation technique. Your skill, Enia's bird transformation technique, has improved. Experience plus 69. You focused on Enia's bird transformation technique. Wizard Apprentice, Transcendent, experience plus 151. Congratulations, your Wizard Apprentice Transcendent profession level has advanced." The panel now showed Wizard Apprentice Transcendent profession level from LV5 to LV6, 11/3000, and at the bottom of the panel remaining attribute points, 5, and remaining skill points, 1, were displayed. Seeing this, a radiant smile spread across Rieni's face. Meanwhile, Vinika couldn't help but feel a mix of surprise and curiosity as to why Lord Rieni's smile was so radiant after observing the demonstration. Could it be that Lord Rieni has already learned it? Impossible. She only mastered it after studying with the mentor for a month. This time, the greatest gain for Rieni was not just the raise in his profession level as a Wizard Apprentice, Transcendent, nor was it the newly mastered witchcraft Enia's bird transformation technique, but rather the newly acquired skill points. It was crucial for him. After returning to his room, Rieni took out the beast essence and eagerly added the skill point to Kadar martial arts, which instantly advanced from LV9 to LV10. As the promotion was successful, the system prompt also rang out. Ding! Host detected to have achieved LV10 in any 3 different categories of extraordinary. Battle technique, triggering a job change to Weapon Master Legendary. To advance to Weapon Master Legendary, the prerequisites are: 1. At least 3 different categories of extraordinary battle technique at LV10 or above. 2. Physical limit broken to 100%. 3. Any breathing technique at LV9 or above. 4. Strength over 20 points, agility over 20 points, constitution over 20 points. 5. Advanced magic potion beast essence. Current conditions met. Do you wish to advance to Weapon Master Legendary? Yes/no. seeing this job change information. Rini couldn't help but rejoice, excitedly clenching his fists and swinging them emphatically. A few kilometers away from Fishing Port Town, on the shores of a secluded island, wave after wave of light blue surf rhythmically lapped against the sand with a splash, splash. Suddenly, a human-shaped object was washed ashore. Cough, cough. Along with the sound of coughing, a sullen-faced, brawny man struggled to climb ashore, his mouth still dripping with a trace of fresh blood, as if he had just experienced a fierce battle and was seriously injured. Tui, the Imperial Navy. The Church of the Goddess. Walad will remember this. If it weren't for the water clone technique scroll this time, I'd have been a goner. In yesterday's battle, had Walad not used the water clone technique sorcery scroll to mimic his shape and divert the masters from the Imperial Navy and the Church of the Goddess, he would have nearly been killed on the spot. As the leader of the Black Sail Pirates, Walad Nehalu possessed the strength of both a senior Great Knight and a Tier 3 wizard apprentice. Because he was skilled at wielding a one-handed warhammer and enjoyed crushing his enemies' skulls during battle, he once killed a senior knight wearing a plate helmet with a single blow, thus earning the formidable nickname Skull Crusher. Hydrotherapy. Walad started chanting, and soon a bright white orb of water appeared in front of him. The next second, with a pop, the bright water orb exploded over his head, with fine mist like water vapor spreading from his head all over his body. This rain-like mist seemed to have an excellent healing effect, rapidly healing some wounds on his body. After the treatment, Walad, whose complexion had been somewhat pale, now looked much better, and his brow began to smooth out over the past 2 years. He had had the opportunity to step into the formal ranks of wizardry, precisely to become a controller of flowing water, a wizard specializing in the control of water flows, through deals with the Sea God sect. But unexpectedly, just as he was about to advance, his plans came undone. The most crucial defensive Tier 1 water witchcraft surrounding water flow, which he had just obtained at a huge cost from the Sea God sect, got lost before he could learn it in battle. Not to mention his dream of advancement was shattered, but his Black Sail Pirates that he had nurtured for years was also nearly wiped out. Walad harbored a deep hatred for the Empire because of this. Where is this? It looks like an offshore island. Walad looked around into the distance. He noticed a gray line on the horizon and knew it was the Continental Line. As the saying goes, the most dangerous places are the safest. His water clone had headed into the open sea, and now he found himself near the coast. Moreover, Casella, the Sea God sect's regional head known as the Deep Water Lord, was fleeing into the open sea. The Imperial Navy and the Church of the Goddess would likely be deployed en masse to pursue her. Could take advantage of this small island to rest and recover from his injuries for a couple of days. As long as his combat power was restored, he had nothing to fear. After a bit of contemplation, Walad had planned his next few days. Suddenly, Walad's figure gradually disappeared into the palm forest of the small island. Note: after advancing to a weapon master, legendary, the Knight, Transcendent. Class panel will be overridden. Yes, initiating class change. Continuing transformation. Ding. Class change to Weapon Master, Legendary, successful. Constitution +5, Strength +5, Agility +5, Spirit +3. Ding. Host has entered the Legendary tier. Total number of class panels +1. Current limit of class panels is 5. Received Weapon Master, Legendary, exclusive talent. Primary Weapon Mastery, passive. Received Weapon Master, Legendary, exclusive talent. Primary Extraordinary Understanding, passive. Transcendent trait Steel Skin, LV3, evolved into. Talent. Primary Steel Body, passive. Transcendent trait Huge Strength, LV3, evolved into talent. Primary Huge Strength, active. Ding. It has been detected that the host possesses the core skill Strength Burst, which can be fused with the talent Primary Huge Strength, automatically initiating fusion. Ding. Fusion successful. Talent. Primary Huge Strength, active, upgraded to talent. Intermediate Giant Force, active. After stepping into the role of a weapon master, Rain seemed to break through a deeper layer of shackles that had been constraining his body, located somewhere within. Now, Rain could feel every cell in his body buzzing with excitement and joy. Surging power coursing around him at this moment. The original Knight, Transcendent panel had vanished without a trace, replaced by the Weapon Master, Legendary, class panel. The entire panel was also shimmering with a very special blue glow, distinctly different from the green glow of the previous Knight, Transcendent, class panel. The system notifications flooded the screen. almost too many for Rain to keep up with. But each item displayed warranted a detailed look, so Rain carefully reviewed them one by one. Apart from Spirit, which had only increased by 3 points, all other attributes had risen by 5 points each. No wonder his body was filled with strength and vitality. His limit for the number of panels had increased by 1, reaching a total of 5, 4 over 5. Seeing this, Rain couldn't help but get excited. This meant that once he chose a new class, his strength would leap drastically once again. Next are the 2 Weapon Master, Legendary, exclusive talents. Rain focused his attention back on the Weapon Master, Legendary, class panel. But strangely, he couldn't find the 4 talents that had just been notified by the system on the class panel. After searching around, Rain finally found the descriptions of these 4 talents below the attributes section on the homepage. Name: Rain Carlin class. Weapon Master Legendary LV1 0 over 100 / Wizard Apprentice Transcendent LV6 11 / 3000 / Beast Tamer Transcendent LV5 102 / 2000 / Armorsmith LV6 211 / 3000 Constitution 27 Strength 27 Agility 28 Spirit 31 remaining attribute points 5 remaining skill points 0 beneath the panel title. Above the skill icons, several new lines of text had appeared. Weapon Master, Legendary, exclusive talent. Primary Weapon Mastery, passive. Primary Weapon Mastery, passive effect. The Weapon Master has a natural familiarity with various weapons. Using any weapon comes with an Expertise LV1 effect. Note: Hammer Expertise LV3 remains unchanged. Weapon Master, Legendary, exclusive talent. Primary Extraordinary Understanding, passive. Primary Extraordinary Understanding, passive effect. The Weapon Master picks up various combat skills effortlessly, learning any extraordinary battle technique 30% faster. Talent: Primary Steel Body, passive. Primary Steel Body, passive effect. The skin surface of the body is constantly interacting with the metallic elements around, greatly enhancing skin defensive power. Note: Steel Body effect is positively correlated with Spirit. Talent: Intermediate Giant Force, active. Intermediate Giant Force, active effect. When used, strength increases by up to 200%. Note: the duration is related to Constitution. Note: the enhancement range can be controlled freely between 1% and 200%. Note: none of the talents can be increased with skill points. Rain looked at the 2 exclusive talents of the Weapon Master and pondered. Perhaps the reason the system recognizes the Weapon Master as a legendary class is because of these 2 additional exclusive talents. It's very likely that if he had changed class to Great Knight, these 2 talents probably wouldn't have appeared. Also, he was starting to understand why the Weapon Master, like a full-fledged wizard, was also a legendary class. That's because this class has an extremely high potential for growth. Learning extraordinary battle techniques 30% faster. What does that mean? It means that as time goes by, as long as Rain continues to learn and improve his combat skill levels, his repertoire of tactics for dealing with opponents will grow larger and larger. Rain had already made up his mind. In the future, if he encountered any decent extraordinary battle techniques, he would definitely claim them all. Of course, there's no rush for this. He still has an extraordinary archery skill he hasn't learned yet, the Blood Fury archery from Bloody Shooter Phil Kraz. But immediately another problem came to Rain's mind. That was, for him, learning these extraordinary combat skills would naturally be much easier than for others. But the issue lies in the fact that different combat skills require different weapons to execute, and that could become a problem. He'd need many weapons, for no reason at all. Rain's mind suddenly conjured an image of a Peking Opera Diomedan character with 4 different colored flags attached to their back. Except, he imagined himself equipped with 4 different weapons. No, in the future, 4 types would definitely not be enough. Perhaps it would be 6. Rain suddenly found himself at a loss for words. If it really came down to that, this setup would be absolutely extraordinary. Of course, there's another method: arranging a team of knight attendants, with each person carrying a different type of weapon for him. It's just, this spectacle seems a bit too grand, and far too eye-catching. After some thought, failing to come up with any good solution, Rain shook his head slightly and continued to read on. To his surprise, the 2 transcendent characteristics of a knight had actually transformed into talents. This brought a bit of secret delight to Rain. The advanced magic potion he had taken was of high quality, otherwise, he might now be lacking the steel body talent. The last talent, which was also the only one that had reached a mid-tier level, was the result of the system merging huge strength and strength burst. Just as Rain was about to continue reading, a knock sounded at the door. Thump, thump, thump. Baron, sir, Major America and Miss Vinica are already waiting for you in the dining room for dinner, reported the servant outside the door. Rain glanced at the clock and realized that it was already 7 o'clock in the evening without him noticing. All right, I'll be right there. His spirit lifted at the happy occasion. During dinner, both Marika and Vinica could feel the joy in Rain's expression. The two women exchanged glances, both a bit puzzled and unable to fathom the reason for a while. Could it be because of the resolution of the issues with the Sea God sect and the pirates? After dinner, Rain informed the Riemann brothers that he would need to go out the next day, and the administrative affairs of Fishing Port Town would be left to them. In addition, he held on to his brother, Cobert Riemann. Cobert, in a while, I'll propose to Count Habs that I step down from my dual roles as the governor and the marshal of Fishing Port Town, and for that position, I'd like to recommend you as the governor. I'd like to hear your thoughts, Rain said. Actually, it was almost unnecessary to hear Cobert's opinion once Rain finished speaking. Just from the joy that spread across Cobert's face, it wasn't hard to guess that he was very interested in Rain's proposal. Baron, sir, are you really planning to step down as the governor of Fishing Port Town? In fact, we could serve as the marshal to help you share some of the workload, Cobert said, rubbing his hands together. Rain smiled. He could clearly hear the underlying message in Cobert's words. However, he wasn't being modest. He truly no longer had the time to serve as the governor of Fishing Port Town. Let's settle it then. I'll write a letter to Count Habs. Later, Rain said, waving his hand. That decision was made. That night, Rain didn't get a chance to test out his new weapon master talents. Instead, he went to the blacksmith shop to have bladed finger tigers installed on his plate gauntlets. The following morning, at the Imperial Navy's South Sea Fleet, a small team was heading out to sea in a dinghy. They were the Fish Dragon Squad, responsible for pursuing Valot. They belonged to the Empire Navy Special Division Tide Walkers, structurally similar to the Empire's Sword Bearers organization, but covering a much smaller scope. The name Tide Walkers actually held a deeper meaning, as it originated from a passage recorded in ancient texts. The Titan giants, striding upon the tides, defeated the old gods. Captain, I heard that Valot has escaped in the direction of the open sea, a young team member asked. A staunch, middle-aged man with a goatee nodded and stayed silent. This is troublesome. Another member muttered while seemingly reviewing aggregated intelligence. He continued. Valot is seriously wounded, and his most likely choice would be to land around Meister County Fishing Port Town or to hide on some small island, waiting to recover before moving inland again. That would allow him to evade our search in the short term. Landing in Fishing Port Town, it's not impossible. He would need a place with people to secure supplies. Another team member nodded, agreeing with the analysis. What's the defensive power like in Fishing Port Town? Asked the goatee-bearing captain in a deep and resonant voice. The young analyst, hearing the captain inquire, perked up and said, Captain, while Fishing Port Town does have a certain level of defensive power, it pales in comparison to Valot's strength. According to intelligence, aside from 2 veteran knights leading an elite team sent out by Earl Habs of Meister County, there's also a special corps from our Imperial Navy in Fishing Port Town. Is it the task force sent out by the 6th Fleet? Yes, Captain Baron. Seems like the only person with some fighting capability is a young girl, right? Captain Baron tried to recall, mumbling to himself. Yes, Captain, the strongest combatant in the Special Corps is called Vinica, an 18-year-old girl who is an apprentice to Master Annius, specializing in avian transmutation, a 3rd-level wizard apprentice. Specializing in what? Avian transmutation, 18 years old, a young girl. The 6th Fleet sure has a big heart. I wonder which general gave that order. Unbelievable. A few young team members behind Baron couldn't help, exchanging surprised glances and whispering among themselves. Can't really blame the 6th Fleet. They dispatched this team initially for intelligence gathering. They weren't expecting to engage in direct combat. The young analyst who had made the previous comment added on reflex. A 3rd-level wizard apprentice specializing in avian transmutation. Even though that's also a 3rd-level wizard, there's not much combat strength to speak of. Captain Baron frowned as he listened, shaking his head slightly before sighing. Let's hope Valad doesn't go straight for fishing. Port Town had been careless this time, deceived by Valad's water clone. They had almost reached the open sea before realizing they had been chasing a clone all along. As it was a water-based cloning technique, it lasted especially long in the sea, and the effect was exceptionally good. It had almost fooled them all. Baron recalled the situation at the time. The young man analyzing the intelligence flipped to the last few pages, seeming to find something interesting. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Huh, Captain, I've looked at the latest intelligence, and the governor of Fishing Port Town is a baron named Rain. His strength seems quite formidable. Perhaps he can put up a fight." "What strength?" Baron couldn't help but turn to look at his subordinate, asking with a hint of confusion. It says here he's a peak knight." "Peak knight?" Captain Baron looked at his subordinate in surprise. He did not believe his subordinates were incapable of assessing Valad's strength. Several captains of the Navy's 6-tier ships had died at the hands of the enemy. Weren't those captains all peak knights? And they were the kind that had been battle-hardened. "Captain Baron, this Baron Rain seems a bit special. His intelligence file has a piece of confidential information. It says he was the top of the Imperial examination for knighthood in the Minster province from the winter batch of Imperial calendar, year 2334. Top of the examination. Several young men turned their heads to look at their analyzing teammate. This is a bit tricky to say. Baron immediately fell into contemplation. However, the winter batch of Imperial calendar year 2334, that was just over a month ago. I'm afraid he hasn't grown into his potential yet. Maybe he can hold his own for a bit, but it's very likely he won't win against Valad. Several teammates began to discuss among themselves. From another perspective, if such a talent were to die before his time, it would be a loss for the Empire, Captain Baron said solemnly. "Odward, speed up to Fishing Port Town." "Yes, Captain." Immediately the teammate named Odward at the stern began to cast a certain witchcraft, and with a burst of blue light, the speed of their small boat suddenly increased by 2 levels. Like an arrow loosed from its bow, it split the waves and sped towards the coastal area. Almost at the same time, Rain and Vinica boarded a small boat, heading towards the target island. Rain had declined the Riaman brothers' suggestion to bring more hands, accompanied by 2 prospective knights for protection, first because Fishing Port Town itself was lacking in defense capability, and second, sometimes it was easier to move with fewer people. So, this time Rain had merry-picked 2 team members from the Naval Task Force who were adept at handling boats to accompany them. As it was an external mission, Vinica had changed into her pale blue wide wizard robe, which concealed her lovely figure. As they gradually approached the island, they could see the shore dotted with many stilt houses. They could vaguely make out several humanoid creatures wandering about, seemingly fishing by the shore. Rain focused his gaze. They were likely the Black Gill Fish people. Compared to the evil fin fish people he had once slain in Flashgold Town, these Black Gill Fish people were a pale black color, their bodies also covered with fine, slippery scales. However, they were noticeably taller, averaging about 1.6 meters in height, and they also seemed to be stronger. Overall, compared to the evil fin fish people, these Black Gill Fish people were larger in size. It seemed, as Wylan had once said, the strength of Black Gill Fish people is a notch higher than that of evil fin fish people. As they drew closer, the forms of their enemies became clearer. They had a pair of bulging, bubble-like eyes on their fish heads, plus a big mouth full of sharp teeth that reeked of a fishy smell. Though they lacked the distinctive dorsal fin the evil fin fish people had on their backs. Their hands and feet had webs. The weapons they held were also diverse, mostly poor-quality weapons like harpoons, spears, and large knives. "Lord Rain, do we need to find a shore without Black Gill Fish people to land?" asked a task force member with a serious face. Facing so many Black Gill Fish people, he was sure he could not cope if it came to a siege, but, with Lord Rain present, it was a different matter. Rain glanced around and noticed the stilt houses of Black Gill Fish people scattered all along the beach. Finding a suitable landing point would likely take some time. Therefore, he shook his head and said, "No need, just land." The Black Gill Fish people were also bullies who feared the strong, seeing only 4 people in Rain's group. Several Black Gill Fish people quickly ran towards their camp. Soon, with loud cries, they brandished their weapons and started to hunt. Gibberish amid the clamor, about 20 to 30 Black Gill Fish people warriors armed with various harpoons, knives, and clubs surged out, charging at Rain and his companions from both sides, full of menace. Seeing the Black Gill Fish people closing in, but with Baron Rain still standing calmly at the front, seemingly unfazed. The two task force members exchanged glances and couldn't help but say, "Lord Rain." "No rush, leave it to me," Rain said calmly. When the black gillfish people got within about 10 meters, close enough to smell the strong sea funk, Rain suddenly made his move. He pulled out the dark two-handed warhammer from behind, and immediately, with gravel flying underfoot, leapt high into the air, raising the warhammer with both hands and slammed it down heavily on the sandy beach. It was the secret move of the Tokkul hammer technique, the earth-splitting hammer. Boom! A visible blast of air mixed with gravel swept through all the Blackjaw fishermen warriors in the fan-shaped area ahead at high speed. Bang, bang, bang. When the shockwave had swept through, all the Blackjaw fishermen warriors, as if struck by an immobilization spell, stood still in place. The next second, a rapid succession of bursting sounds emanated from the bodies of the Blackjaw fishermen. The fishermen, like snakes with their spines removed, collapsed limply onto the beach. With just one strike, Rini had dealt with over 30 Blackjaw fishermen warriors. Fishman language. Walululu seeing this, the Blackjaw fishermen in the distance panicked and hastily turned and scattered. Too weak, Rini couldn't help feeling a bit of regret in his heart. The first battle after his promotion to the legendary class of Weapon Master was against these Blackjaw fishermen. It truly felt like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Although, compared to the evil Fin fishmen, these Blackjaw fishmen were a notch stronger, and among this group of warriors, there were 2 or 3 particularly strong individuals at the level of Quasi-Knights. However, compared to Riani from half a year ago, his strength had undergone earth-shattering changes. "You two just wait here for us. The fishmen should not come back. If there really is any unexpected situation, you can retreat immediately. We will send up a flare when we are done." Rini turned and spoke to the 2 stunned Special Task Force members. Okay, sir." The task force members still hadn't snapped out of it and stared dumbfounded at the beach, where the impact wave had carved away several dozen centimeters of gravel over several tens of meters. And on Vinika's pretty face, the corners of her mouth turned up slightly in a smile that could hardly be suppressed. Her beautiful eyes frequently sized up Rini, full of fascination. However, Rini didn't notice this. At the moment, he was looking at the system prompts. "Your skill Tokkul hammer technique has improved. Experience plus 27. You have experienced a battle. Weapon Master, Legendary, Professional Experience points plus 7. Clearly, compared to the Knight Transcendent, the Weapon Master, Legendary, earned far fewer professional experience points. After a moment's thought, Rini figured that this was probably because the strength of the Blackjaw fishermen was too weak to earn decent experience points at the Legendary level. One should kill those at the Transcendent level, whereas killing those below the Transcendent level greatly reduces the experience points. Just then, a larger-than-average white seagull cried out from the sky, quickly spiraled down, and, flapping its wings, landed on Vinika's right arm. A few seconds later, Vinika turned her head in surprise and said to Riani, "Lord Riani, Major Marika just urgently notified us, saying that she received the latest intelligence from the fleet. They are pursuing a high-ranking member of the Black Sail Pirates, the gang leader known as Skull Crusher Walad Nihalu, who might not have fled to the high seas but instead has moved to the nearby sea area. Major Marika instructed us to be very cautious and advised that it's best to return to Fishing Port Town now. As for Fishing Port Town, she asked you to rest assured. She has already coordinated with the Riaman brothers to strengthen its defense, with 24-hour patrols now in place." Black Sail's pirate crew captain, Rain, was startled to hear that. Wasn't that the pirate crew bloodshooter Phil Kraz belonged to? Last time, it was Phil Kraz the vice captain, now it's the captain. That indeed is a deep connection. However, he quickly collected himself and nodded, saying, "Yes, Major Mary is very meticulous. By the way, Miss Vinika, do you know anything about this captain of the Black Sail's pirate crew?" Vinika nodded, her expression becoming serious as she explained. "Yes, I have heard of some deeds of this person nicknamed Skull Crusher. For instance, he once killed 3 captains of the South Sea Fleet's level 6 patrol ships, all of whom were Navy colonels and had reached the level of peak knights, yet they all died by his hand. Furthermore, this man is not only a seasoned great knight, but also a seasoned level 3 wizard apprentice, just a step away from becoming a full-fledged wizard, making him extremely difficult to handle. So, even though this Skull Crusher is already on the Imperial Navy's wanted list, relying on the myriad of islets scattered across the nearby seas, He frequently plays hide and seek with the South Sea Fleet, evading capture for the time being. However, Vinika's furrowed brows soon relaxed. Turning to Rain with a smile, she said, "However, it's unlikely to be such a coincidence. Lord Rieni, with such a long coastal line, the chances of us encountering them are really small. Let's continue searching for Ironbeak sea eagle chicks. After all, if we pass this recent period, the chicks will have grown, and the success rate of witchcraft will be greatly reduced." Rain smiled and nodded, saying, "Good." It's not that Rain didn't value the urgent information provided by Major Mary, but because what Vinica said indeed matched his thoughts at the moment. However, deep inside, Rain didn't mind encountering the captain of the Black Sails pirate gang by chance. Seasoned Great Knight and a seasoned level 3 wizard apprentice, he wondered, compared to him, a novice weapon master and level 3 wizard apprentice, who would be stronger or weaker. If he had not been promoted to weapon master before, Rain might have worried about being in trouble if he couldn't beat him. But now it was different. He was actually worried about lacking strong enough opponents to test his skills. If he could encounter this so-called Skull Crusher by chance, that would be fortunate. But soon Rain shook his head slightly, thinking indeed. With such a long coastline, not knowing where the enemy might land, combined with the many islands scattered across the nearby regions, if he could stumble upon them, that would truly be miraculous. Walad, on the other side of the island, suddenly woke up from a deep sleep, murmuring, no earthquake, but I definitely felt a slight tremor just now." Walad looked at the sun rising above the sea level, knowing it was morning already. "Never mind, let's get up and find something to eat. I wonder when someone from the Eagle Federation will come for me. I already contacted them yesterday using the communication witchcraft device given by a spy from the Eagle Federation. They should find me within the next day or two." It wasn't that Walad wanted to be a dog for the Eagle Federation, but thinking about his promotion that fell through at the last moment, and his painstakingly built Black Sails pirate crew being destroyed by the Imperial Navy all at once. Walad felt he couldn't swallow that disgrace. He couldn't settle his mind without avenging this vendetta. As Rain and Vinica made their way toward the cliff where the Ironbeak sea eagles nested, Rain checked the status of his freshly advanced class from yesterday, the Weapon Master Legendary. In the corner below the bolded words, Weapon Master Legendary, a few lines of small text were visible. Physical First Order Breakthrough Limit, 100%. Physical Second Order Breakthrough Limit, 17%. Note: original strength is approximately equal to the Physical Second Order Breakthrough Limit. The power of Rain's recent strike was much stronger than before. On one hand, it was due to an increase of 5 points in the basic attributes of strength, agility, and constitution, and on the other, the previously capped breakthrough limit could now be exceeded. In fact, as soon as Rain saw the description of the physical second order breakthrough limit, he had a suspicion. It seemed that the path of the knight truly focused on pursuing the development of one's own body, or rather, unlocking the body, thereby obtaining transcendental combat prowess. Also, during the battle with the black-cheeked fishman, Rain had a chance to test out his understanding of how the first and second order breakthrough limits contributed to the enhancement of his attributes. The method was essentially the same as before. Assuming a basic agility of 10 points, with the activation of the first order physical breakthrough limit, it would increase by 100%, becoming 20 points, calculated as 10 times 1 plus 100%. Now, however, it would be 10 times 1 plus 100% plus 17%, and not 10 times 1 plus 100% and then times 1 plus 17%. Simply put, the increases from the first and second order breakthrough limits were additive, and 10 points of agility could be boosted to 21.7. As for the calculation of strength, the bonus from the talent Intermediate Giant Strength needed to be included. If the base strength was also 10 points, then it would be 10 times 1 plus 100% plus 17% plus 200%, which is clearly a terrifying increase. 10 points of strength, when fully exerted, could reach an extent of 41.7. Of course, such a full exertion would drain a great deal of stamina, and on the other hand, if one's constitution couldn't keep up, there could be side effects such as muscle soreness or even outright paralysis. Rain had already experienced this firsthand. Switching the interface back to the homepage attributes page, Rain looked at his 4 talents and began to comprehend something. Why are talents so important? Because if someone was born with the junior giant strength talent, once they became an adult, their base strength would be slightly weaker compared to that of a formal knight, but with the enhancement from the talent. In terms of strength alone, they could completely compete with formal knights, even senior ones. If one possessed the intermediate giant strength talent, then as an adult, they could compete with peak knights. No wonder some races documented in ancient books were so formidable in battle. Walking beside Rain, Vinica, wearing a light blue robe, was clearly in high spirits, her beautiful eyes casting frequent glances toward Rain. With Rain at her side, she felt an inexplicable sense of security. Moreover, whether it was an illusion or not, Vinica's keen senses told her that Lord Rain in front of her seemed to have undergone some mysterious change since yesterday. This change was hard to define. It was as if Lord Rain had become more charismatic. Due to the choice of their landing location, they were quite near to the cliff, where the Ironbeak sea eagles nested. So, in less than 20 minutes, Rain and Vinica both arrived at the base of the cliff. The cliff was a formidable 4 to 5 dozen meters high and almost vertical, but the rock face was pockmarked with exposed brown rocks, which made it clear to Rain that climbing would not be difficult for him. The several huge Ironbeak sea eagles soaring above the cliff appeared to have noticed the unwelcome guests and began circling in the sky, observing Rain and Vinica. Rain looked up and scrutinized the Ironbeak sea eagles. The creatures were entirely brown, with a wingspan of at least 3 meters. The Ironbeaks were black, curved, hook-shaped, and extremely sharp. From their appearance, their temperament seemed quite ferocious. Rain nodded to himself internally. Indeed, these birds, with the beginnings of vicious strength, could certainly be considered for him to capture a fledgling as his third pet and slowly train it later on. "Miss Vinica, is there anything specific you need me to do?" Rain asked. "Lord Rain, in a moment, I'll have Big White attract the attention of the Ironbeak sea eagles. Then I will rely on you to climb the cliff and catch a few of these Ironbeak sea eagle chicks," Vinica replied. "I only need 3 fledglings, and after you come down, I will cast the mist technique. Using the cover of the mist, we can safely leave this place," she added. Vinica clearly had experience and organized her plan methodically. "Oh, and Lord Rain," she continued, "the iron beak of the Ironbeak sea eagle is very powerful. A mere peck can breach the skulls of most animals once grasped in its talons. Although it might not pose a threat to you, I would still urge you to be cautious," she cautioned. In fact, after arriving here, Vinica could have managed on her own, but she was quite looking forward to some interaction with Rain. "Understood, Miss Vinica," Rain nodded his response. Vinica needed 3 chicks, and with one for himself, meant that he had to bring down at least 4 fledglings. "Lord Rain, when you're ready, I'll send Big White out," Vinica said. "Ready," Rain affirmed. Then, under Vinica's command, the giant white owl Big White, covered in a pale blue water film, took flight towards the cliff, immediately provoking the Ironbeak sea eagles. It was only a few seconds before the giant white owl entangled itself in a mid-air battle with 4 or 5 iron-billed sea eagles, sending feathers flying in disarray. Rain knew the opportunity was ripe and immediately began to ascend the cliffside. After several agile steps, Rain quickly arrived at an iron-billed sea eagle's nest, where he saw 2 downy eaglets crying out, one of which seemed to have just hatched, barely opening its eyes. "Are there 2 in a nest?" After a moment of thought, Rain decided not to take them all and instead chose to carry off the younger chick before heading to the second sea eagle's nest. This isn't a sea eagle egg, is it?" In the second nest, Rain looked with some surprise at the purple giant egg, which was clearly a different color and much larger than the broken shells beside it. As the battle between the giant white owl and the iron-billed sea eagles broke out, the cries of the iron-billed sea eagles, sharp and piercing, carried far and wide. At this time, on the other side of the island, Skull Crusher Walroth was grill roasting a large fish by a campfire. Barely making out the cries of the iron-billed sea eagles, Walroth narrowed his eyes and listened intently. Seems like the cry of some kind of eagle. From the density and urgency of these calls. Are they in combat? Frown creased Walroth's brow, and he immediately rose from below the tree, pacing back and forth in thought among the palm trees. The eagle's natural predators are few. What could have caused such cries unless someone is fighting with them? No good, I need to investigate. If it's the Imperial Navy or a pursuit team from the mainland, I'm at disadvantage. Walroth swiftly snatched up his fish and kicked sand, extinguishing the campfire with a sweep of gravel. Then, he turned heel and hastened toward the direction of the sea eagle's cries. Minutes later, Walroth arrived near the cliffside. Just below where the giant white owl and iron-billed sea eagles were engaged in battle. This owl, could it be the bird transformation technique? Walroth looked up, pupils contracting as he murmured. At the same time, he saw a beautiful girl in a light blue robe and a young man in knight's plate armor, holding 4 or 5 chicks as well as a purple egg. At that moment, the young man in armor was quickly closing the distance to the girl. High-grade knight's plate armor, that must be some noble's offspring. Walroth eyed the noble crest on Rain's breastplate closely, guessing at Rain's identity. Soon, Walroth's attention turned to the girl. The sea breeze brushed past, outlining the beautiful curves of the girl in her flowing robe, prompting Walroth to lick his slightly cracked lips. As former captain of the Black Sail Pirates, Walroth used to have his fill of women, but times were now different. Having fled in disarray for days, he hadn't known the taste of flesh for some time. Tusk, seems my luck isn't bad running into a female wizard apprentice, and these two must be a couple. The sweet love between a knight and a girl, so tempting to shatter it. Being an experienced level 3 wizard apprentice and a seasoned great knight himself, Walroth quickly identified Vinika's true identity as a wizard apprentice, which intrigued him even more. He also swiftly sketched out the likely relationship between the two. The young knight must be accompanying the girl to capture the young iron-billed sea eagles. Being a combination of knight and wizard apprentice, their safety in this nearby sea region wasn't a concern, so after searching around, Walroth found no one else nearby. Unfortunately, you two happened upon me. A sinister smile crept onto Walroth's face. Break the young man's spine, then make him watch as I ravaged the girl. Thinking of this scene got Walroth excited. He immediately cast the water mirror technique on himself, cloaking his form in a layer of mysterious water, making him vanish from sight. From the side, one could see Walroth disappear in place, obscured by the water mirror that allowed bystanders to see it, but not his figure. The effect of the water mirror technique was similar to the famed invisibility spell. Although Walroth regarded Rain as merely a knight of moderate skill, he still opted for an ambush, hoping to win with a single strike. For a seasoned great knight like him to ambush a young knight was a low move, something perhaps only Walroth would stoop to. He planned to strike from behind with one blow, aiming to break the young man's spine then and there. The opponent would only suffer and wriggle on the ground. Although the girl was a wizard apprentice, she would likely be overwhelmed, and he should be able to end the fight within a few seconds. Otherwise, a knight teamed with a wizard apprentice could cause him some trouble, leading to unforeseen complications. He couldn't forget that he was still being pursued by the Imperial Navy. The next second, Walroth, carrying the skull warhammer, pushed off with his toes and lunged directly at Rain's back. From the side, one could only see a distorted, transparent figure flicker behind Rain. In an instant, a level 3 danger perception alarm blared frantically for Rain. With Rain facing Veronica, and the attack coming from his back, so Rain instantly made a combat judgment. He could not dodge the opponent's attack now, and had only to withstand it. As Rain turned around, click, the blade finger tiger shot out, and he crossed his arms in front of his chest. At that moment, a few meters in front of Rain, a flurry of light and shadow flashed, and suddenly, where there had been no one before, a sinister man holding a skull warhammer abruptly appeared. And just as the man appeared, his attack followed. Clang! Rain took the blow with the blade finger tigers on his armored gloves, but in the haste, he could not muster his strength. Rain was hit like he'd been struck by a cannonball, and his body was instantly flung 7 or 8 meters back, crashing heavily against the cliff behind him. Boom! At the cliff, dust billowed. Without looking, one knew that Rain's entire body had been smashed into the cliff. Quite a quick reaction. Unfortunately, the outcome will not change, Valord said, showing slight surprise at Rain's ability to react to his surprise attack and turn to block. But once his strike hit, he knew it was all over. Even if the opponent were a great knight, he would be severely injured under his surprise attack, let alone this young man. Suddenly, Vinika let out a piercing scream. She then somewhat frantically cast a water membrane technique to protect her body and began to rummage through her chest for something. After landing his blow, Valord was no longer in a rush to attack again. Instead, he regarded the beautiful young girl before him with interest. Seeing the panicked expression on the girl's face brought a perverse pleasure to Valord's heart. "Don't move, take your hands out," Valord commanded, lifting his white skull warhammer. At that moment, Vinika glanced at the white skull warhammer in his hand and seemed to realize something. She tremblingly extended her fair fingers, pointing at Valord, and said, You are Skull Crusher Valord, the leader of the Bloodsail pirate gang." Hearing the girl's words, Valord was obviously startled and glanced at her, slightly surprised. You actually know me?" Valord scrutinized the young girl before him carefully. She wore a pale blue wizard robe, and additionally her bird seemed vaguely familiar. He hazarded a guess at her background and said gravely, "You are with the Empire's Navy." Before Vinica could answer, Valord discerned the answer he wanted from the girl's astonished eyes. This made his smile even brighter. This was really interesting. The Empire's Navy had just chased him like a dog at a loss, and now he had ironically found a girl affiliated with the Empire's Navy just right to quench his resentment. However, the next second, Valord's smile froze. He felt something was amiss. He immediately looked to the side. Valord's eyes widened in disbelief at the scene before him. Where the cliff was, after the dust had settled, the young knight who should have been embedded in the cliff had disappeared. This alarmed him immediately. In the next second he felt a wind at the back of his head, only to see a silhouette swinging down a two-handed warhammer at him. Valord instantly turned to block. Clang! The grating noise of the hard object striking echoed. Valord firmly caught Rain's strike. Although Rain had not pushed his intermediate giant strength talent to its utmost, at this moment, he was exercising at least over 80% of his strength, but Valord managed to steady himself and catch this blow. Rain's pupils contracted. Indeed worthy of the Black Sail pirate gang leader, very strong. Even stronger than the rebel General Perix. On the contrary, Valord was more surprised. Being a senior great knight himself, and having attacked a knight by surprise, it was impossible for the other party to be unharmed. It's really unbelievable. The fact that Rain had just been flung by Valord's blow was not because his danger perception hadn't worked. Having been alerted in advance, Rain was mentally prepared, and his muscles tensed, taking the nearly full force of the other's surprise attack. Otherwise, any great knight in that situation would have been severely injured by Valord's surprise attack. At this point, besides the water membrane steel armguard on Rain's arm being severely dented, the rest of his body, thanks to the steel body talent, was practically unharmed. While both were lost in their thoughts, the fighting on the scene grew increasingly intense. Rain took the force of the leap to swing his dark hoghead hammer again, deploying the heavy hammer jump strike. Valord's surprise grew even more. He had thought his recent block would have flung Rain several meters away, but what he hadn't anticipated was that the opponent had almost simultaneously absorbed the shock from the collision of the hammers and then launched another attack. Clang! Rain followed one blow with another, launching a fierce attack at Valord. Rain's attack speed became faster and faster, the dark hoghead hammer now barely discernible in outline, and the sound of hammer striking hammer was so fast it almost felt like a continuous line. This sight left Vinica beside them with wide eyes and her small cherry lips agape, as if she could stuff an apple into her mouth. This. According to the information, Valord is both a senior great knight and a senior third-level wizard apprentice, nearly stepping into a full-fledged wizard. But looking at the battle, Lord Rini was not at all inferior to his opponent. He even had a slight upper hand. Facing this situation, Vinica felt a bit dizzy. After dozens of continuous strikes, Valod started to grow gradually impatient. As the leader of the Black Sail pirate crew, being pushed to this extent by someone much younger than him, he considered it a great disgrace to his face. This situation had to change. He suddenly let out a roar. The white bone hammer in his right hand started to vibrate violently, emitting a sound similar to a rattlesnake shaking its tail. High-frequency shock. Rini squinted his eyes, knowing that the other party was definitely using some kind of secret technique. Possibly even a secret technique. But he was not intimidated at all. Rini also executed the Tokkul hammer technique's secret technique, earth-splitting hammer, choosing to clash directly with the opponent's trump card. Clang! It was like the sound of thunder exploding. Both of them were blown away, not to mention neither could hold onto their violently vibrating hammers. Thus, one large, one small, one white, one black, both hammers flew out tens of meters away, but this made Valod's heart leap with joy. A smile immediately appeared on his face. "Kid, you're done for. Without your handy weapon, let's see how I deal with you." Valod swiftly drew his secondary weapon, a pale silver dagger of palm length from his waist, whereas Rini in turn drew out the dual-handed greatsword from his back. Valod smiled. Although it was rare to see someone like Rini carrying two heavy weapons, normally, one would generally have a primary weapon. He had already experienced Rionese two-handed warhammer. With that level of power and mastery, he knew the two-handed warhammer must certainly be Rionese's primary weapon. So clearly, the greatsword was probably his secondary weapon, which meant that the mastery would inevitably drop by a notch or even two. Thus, he was not worried about the upcoming battle at all. But the next second, Volad's expression froze. After taking a hit from Rionese's smooth cleaving slash, Volod felt his right hand holding the dagger go numb. How could this be possible? An expert is revealed by a single move. The opponent's greatsword was also that proficient. Actually, for Rionese, using the greatsword or the two-handed warhammer, the difference in combat ability was negligible. But compared to his single-handed warhammer, Volod's dagger was lacking by more than just one tier. Thus, contrary to Volod's expectations, after both their hammers were dropped, Rionese actually gained the upper hand. Therefore, Rionese, wielding the greatsword, pursued and chopped at Volod rapidly. Volod could only parry Rionese's greatsword slashes with his dagger very cautiously, retreating all the way to a rock wall. At this point, Vinica was already stunned. She had completely loosened her grip on the Water Tomb sorcery scroll she was holding tightly. Facing Rionese's slashes, all Volod could do was stick close to the rock wall, dodging rapidly while blocking. With one advancing and the other retreating, the rock wall showed, in just a few seconds, over 100 deep greatsword slash marks approximately 20 to 30 centimeters deep. Volod was already quite disheveled at this point. His eyes flickered, and he immediately became fierce. Tearing off a diamond-shaped crystal amulet from around his neck, Vinica, upon seeing the danger, shouted "Watch out," while hastily tearing open a sorcery scroll to cast the water membrane technique on Rain, because just a moment ago she had felt that the opponent's amulet contained a powerful aquatic energy. Although it might not quite match the Tomb of Water sorcery scroll given to her by her tutor, the energy fluctuations were nearly the same. The moment Rionese saw the diamond-shaped crystal, alarm bells rang in his head, and with the tip of his toes, he immediately flew backward. As soon as the fierce-looking Wald crushed the amulet in his hands, splash, instantly, a basin-sized, rapidly spinning stream of water appeared out of nowhere in front of him. The water, like a cannonball, spun towards Rain. Due to the high speed, Rionese could only perform a defensive move and block with his dual-handed greatsword in front. With a loud bang, Rionese, along with his greatsword, was blown back more than 10 meters. His greatsword flew out of his hand upon first contact with the vortex strike. Almost at the same instant, the light blue water membrane on Rain's body burst apart. Following that, even the high-level knight's breastplate was left with a large dent. However, after these two layers of defense had slowed the impact, Rain, relying on his innate steel body, still managed to absorb the remaining force of the shock. Seeing Rain's greatsword flying out of his hand and him being blown back more than 10 meters, Wald's face lit up with joy. "You little pest, you almost had me capsized in the gutter," he said. "Now just die quietly." Proudly, Wald tapped his foot on the ground, causing the soil to burst, and like an arrow freed from its bow, he dashed straight towards Rain. Unexpectedly, the next second, Rain sprang up from where he was and counterattacked. Cling clang cling clang. Since Wald's dagger was a short blade, Rain's finger tiger was also considered a short weapon. Both were extremely fast in their attacks, making the sound of their weapons clashing almost constant. It was like the continuous sound of a string of firecrackers exploding. In Vinica's eyes, she just saw two mists drifting around the cliff face. Round the mist were continuous sparks, like fireworks bursting in a tree. At the same time, if a spark accidentally scraped against the nearby cliff, the rock would immediately show claw-like marks from a dagger or blade. Impossible. How could this be possible? It absolutely couldn't be. Wald felt that the young man before him had completely surpassed his understanding. So proficient in the warhammer, so proficient in the greatsword. Damn it, even this finger tiger is mastered so thoroughly. If the opponent were a nearly 100-year-old man, it wouldn't be so surprising, but looking at his age, he didn't appear to be over 20 years old. Even if he had started training from the age of 1, to have mastered any single weapon to this extent would already make him a top genius. But now, it's freaking 3. How could there be such a person, at such a young age, to have mastered all 3 weapons to this extent? Right now, Wald's brain was spinning so fast it was about to explode, yet he couldn't figure out why. The continued high-intensity combat caused Volod's movements to begin to slow down ever so slightly, although the change was minimal. But as his opponent, Rain acutely perceived this change in Volod. However, Volod didn't take this change to heart because, although his stamina had drastically decreased, his opponent wouldn't be faring any better, and their decrease was likely even greater. Although he was constantly blocking the attacks from the opponent's finger tiger with his dagger, because he couldn't afford a single misstep, it was extremely draining on his spirit. But the opponent's previous swinging of the two-handed warhammer and greatsword was equally exhausting. Based on normal logic and his rich combat experience, Volod's thoughts were definitely correct, however. The problem was that Rain had a cheat. Seeing that his opponent's strength was beginning to decline, while his own was also decreasing, Rain, almost without hesitation, added a point to his Constitution attribute. With the remaining attribute points going from 5 right arrow for his Constitution also increased from 27 to 28 points. Suddenly, a surge of warm energy forcefully pumped out from his heart and rapidly spread throughout Rain's entire body. In an instant, the slight soreness in his muscles and the sense of fatigue were swept away. Rain steadied his hands, and his speed and strength abruptly returned to the level they had been at the beginning of the fight. Stable, precise, and powerful, within just half a second, Volod sensed that something was off. Because of the relative change in efficiency, Rain's transformation was unusually noticeable to him, as his opponent. Volod's eyes widened in disbelief as he looked at Rain. The opponent definitely didn't have time to use any potion, nor to cast witchcraft, so how could he suddenly be rejuvenated? Volod only felt that Rain's attacks suddenly became exceptionally fierce and aggressive. He found it increasingly difficult to defend himself. One misguided move could result in Rain slicing 4 gashes in his body. The blades of the finger tiger were from General Perix of the Zaral Resistance Army, crafted from some kind of rare ore, and with Rain's forceful chopping, as soon as they cut into Volod's leather armor, they could instantly leave 4 gashes. As time passed, Volod's movements became more and more sluggish, his eyes bloodshot as he exerted all his power, move after move, barely blocking Rain's attacks. But the wounds on his body were not decreasing but multiplying. Several times, Volod tried to repel Rain, hoping to take the opportunity to pull out a potion to drink, or to pull out a sorcery scroll to release, but all were interrupted by Rain's almost close-quarters high-speed boxing. At this stage of the fight, Rain had almost fully gauged the upper limit of Volod's strength. Consequently, the turning point of the entire battle had arrived. 100 crack strike. In an instant, the swinging speed of Rain's left and right hands greatly increased, and the attack speed of the finger tiger completely went up a notch. As the targeted individual, Volod only saw a blanket of cold gleams from Rain's finger tiger enveloping him. This gave him quite a shock. As an experienced third-level wizard apprentice, if the enemy's attack speed wasn't so fast, he would at least have a chance to use a sorcery scroll, and if the opponent's speed was even slower, Volod could have comfortably started chanting spells. But alas, ever since Rain switched to the finger tiger for combat, from beginning to end, Volod never had a moment's respite. He was constantly fully focused on wielding his dagger to defend, which meant he had no opportunity to use any means of witchcraft against Rain. And the only instant-cast witchcraft item, the crystal necklace sealed with Vortex Strike sorcery, had already been used by him. But unfortunately, this rare magical artifact didn't help Volod secure victory. In a moment, with over 100 high-speed blades slicing through the air, the sound of them cutting the atmosphere arose. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The earth beneath Volod's feet exploded, the hard rocks of the surrounding cliffs turned to dust, and he retreated step by step until he embedded himself in the tough cliff wall, with nowhere else to go. Seconds later, the tough leather armor made from an unknown beast's hide worn by Volod was shredded by Rain's Kadar martial arts secret technique, 100 crack strike LV2, which by then hung in tattered strips like rags over his body. At this moment, Volod's body was covered in dozens of wounds of various sizes and depths, profusely oozing crimson blood. Volod, with a fierce look on his face, struggled to walk out from the embedded rock, obviously unwilling to admit defeat. But the severe injuries to his limbs made it impossible for him to move freely. He began to quietly chant the spell for hydrotherapy. Rain's pupils shrank. Even like this, he was planning to cast witchcraft to attack him. Immediately, Rain felt rather annoyed with this obstinate captain of the Black Sail Pirates. PFFCHT, the next second, Volod was hit by Rain's jab to the next vital point. Valad clutched his neck, his eyes bulging, spewing mouthfuls of blood. Originally, Rain had intended to spare his life because, as the captain of the Black Sail Pirates, Valad would likely yield a lot of valuable information upon interrogation, but considering the recent events, this guy was simply too dangerous. Rain felt that it would be better to turn his opponent into a corpse that could no longer cast spells. Looking at Valad slowly collapsing, Rain turned to Vinica, who had been dumbfounded by the sight, and said, "Let's get out of here first." "Sure, Lord Rini." Vinica nodded immediately. At this moment, her head was still buzzing. Anything Lord Rini said, she would just nod her head in agreement. The main reason Rini wanted to leave in such a hurry was that the noise from his recent fight with Walrode had been too loud. Secondly, the smell of blood on the other party might attract some unnecessary trouble. So for safety's sake, it was better to leave this place first, especially since he and Vinica had already successfully completed their mission on this small island. As for the spoils of war, he planned to search Walrode's body when he returned to Fishing Port Town. The iron-beaked sea hawks that had been battling the giant White Owl had now distanced themselves far from Rieni, circling high above the cliff and not daring to come down. It seemed they had sensed that the two humans who had just fought below the cliff were extremely powerful, and their animal instincts completely deterred them from approaching. Meanwhile, Great White proudly chirped a few times, took the initiative to grab Rieni's greatsword with its right claw, and his war hammer with its left claw after Rieni had killed Walrode. Additionally, Great White's beak held Walrode's white bone hammer, which had also fallen nearby, and it flapped its wings, gliding a short distance to Vinica's side as if to show off its achievement. This made Vinica laugh, as she petted Great White's head and said, "You're quite clever." Seeing there was nothing amiss, Rieni quickly picked up Walrode's still bleeding corpse and hurried towards the boat. Vinica, holding 4 fledglings and the big purple egg, quickly followed. When Rieni and Vinica arrived at the landing point, 2 special task force members guarding the small boat stared in shock at the bloody corpse in Rieni's hand. The two were stunned for a full 2 seconds before they quickly ran over and took Walrode's body. "Lord Rieni, what has happened?" One of the task force members asked in alarm, glancing at Rieni's high-end armor which now had several dents and damages. He knew about Lord Rieni's strength. For the enemy to have caused so much damage to his expensive armor, their strength must have been extraordinary. Before Rieni could answer, Vinica replied, "We were just ambushed by Skull Crusher Walrode, the leader of the Black Sail Pirates, but..." Lord Rieni countered and killed him on the spot. Hearing Vinica's words, the 2 task force members trembled slightly, looking thunderstruck, and stood still for a while, then looked at each other as if to confirm what they had just heard. They had, of course, heard of Skull Crusher Walrode, especially since their mission this time, as part of the task force sent to Meister County, was to investigate the Sea God sect and pirate strongholds, and they had carefully gone over the related materials. This Black Sail pirate leader, being a senior Great Knight and a level 3 wizard apprentice, be reduced to a dead dog by Lord Rieni. "Hey, what are you two blanking out for? Come on and start the boat," Vinica said, looking at the 2 task force members still in shock, and urged them on. Okay, Miss Vinica." Thinking of the possible dangers ahead, the 2 boarded the small boat and immediately drove it back towards Fishing Port Town at high speed. An hour ago, Fisher Dragon's squad had just arrived at Fishing Port Town. After interfacing with Major Marika of the Naval Special Task Force, Baron soon learned that the 2 highest combat powers of the Task Force, Level 3, Wizard Apprentice Vinica, and the current governor of Fishing Port Town, Rieni, had both gone to a distant island to capture the young fledglings of the iron-beaked Sea Hawk. This made him scowl, and he scolded, "That's complete madness. Both of them gone. The remaining defensive force of Fishing Port Town is virtually non-existent. If Walrode truly lands here, there will be no one to delay his actions. This, Captain Baron, we have made rather extensive and thorough arrangements," Major Marika explained. On the other hand, the Riemann brothers didn't look too pleased. Clearly, this captain didn't seem to regard them highly. However, the Riemann brothers weren't foolish to contradict this battle-hardened Imperial Navy veteran. On the spot, just from his formidable aura alone, they knew that Captain Baron was surely a seasoned warrior of the Empire's navy. At that moment, a member of the Fisherdragon squad walked in solemnly and said in a deep voice, "Captain, my Albatross just reported that there's a high-intensity battle going on that small island with the iron-beaked Sea Hawks." Captain Baron couldn't help but look surprised at his own squad member, and Major Marika turned pale, suddenly thinking of a possibility. Could it be that Rieni and Vinica had really encountered? Skull Crusher Walroad, good heavens. Could such a low-probability event actually happen? The Riemann brothers glanced at each other quickly, remaining composed. Unlike the Fisher Dragon squad and Marika, who were anxious and worried, they seemed to have a mysterious confidence in Rieni. Actually, it was because for a period before, the two brothers had been called by Lord Rieni to spar several times. Even though they were fully armed in a 2-on-1 situation, they were beaten soundly. Moreover, this was when Lord Rieni was unarmed. Therefore, they didn't think the situation on the island was as bad as the few people in front of them imagined. Let's go, depart immediately. Baron Captain thought briefly, then made his decision immediately. I'll go too, Major Mary said anxiously. No, you're a civilian, stay in Fishing Port Town. Baron Captain rejected the idea outright. Major Mary, perhaps. The situation might not be as unfavorable as you think, Colbert Riemann consoled. Let's hope those two can hold on a bit longer. Baron Captain sighed, his bulky figure instantly turned and exited the town hall. A speedboat like an arrow released from a bow raced directly toward the island where the Iron-Beak Sea Eagles were. On the boat, the conversation continued. Baron Captain heading there now. A team member hesitated. Yes, Captain, what if that guy Warlord is setting a trap and turns to attack Fishing Port Town? The Baron Captain frowned, silent for a long while, finally said, regardless, we have to check things out. According to what the Riemann brothers said, their governor, Lord Rieni, is not so easily defeated. If we don't come to the rescue, it could be worse. Tish, I don't understand how these guys can be so confident in their own governor. One team member scoffed. Yeah, one is a newly appointed town governor, and the other has been a pirate gang leader at sea for more than a decade. Not to mention, one witchcraft from Warlord could probably finish off this barren reign. Another team member agreed. Now it's up to Vinica to see if she can coordinate well with this barren reign. If she can, they might be able to hold on a bit longer. For how long? Even if we use sorcery to speed up, it will take at least 20 minutes to reach the island, plus the time we just wasted. Half an hour, do you think the two can last that long? Immediately. All the team members of the Fish Dragon squad went silent. Yes, half an hour was really too long. Even a fight between two equally skilled great knights rarely lasted more than 15 minutes. According to their estimate, even if Baron Rain and Vinica could coordinate well, it was highly probable they would be defeated within a few minutes. The only possible glimpse of hope was that Vinica, a level 3 wizard apprentice, using a sorcery scroll could just manage to cause significant trouble for Warlord, and then the two could split and escape. In that case, perhaps if one of them was lucky enough, they could wait until we arrived. Half an hour later, following the guidance of the Albatross, Baron Captain led the Fish Dragon squad to the base of the cliff. Originally, the Iron-Beak Sea Eagles, seeing a strange albatross daring to invade their territory, were about to launch an attack, when suddenly, a group of humans each emitting a strong aura arrived nearby. This made them hesitate immediately. After all, that giant white owl just before was a human subordinate. This albatross is probably the same, right? So, the Iron-Beak Sea Eagles flew high up, circling above the cliff. Meanwhile, Baron Captain and his team, seeing the scene before them, couldn't help but show expressions of shock. There were pits on the ground, as if it had been pounded by a rain of meteorites, and at the bottom of the cliff, there were also markings of varying depths that looked as if they were made by various types of blades, all clearly visible. Baron Captain was the first to regain his composure. He quickly stepped forward, touching a gouge on the hard cliff face, dozens of centimeters deep, slowly saying, "This is master-level swordsmanship. This single stroke would require at least 20 years of arduous practice." Baron Captain appeared to think of a problem, his brows furrowing as he turned his puzzled gaze toward a young team member and asked, "Didn't you say this Baron Rain is young? How old is he?" The young man immediately pulled out a stack of reports and started flipping through them, finally staring blankly at the age section and murmuring, 16, how can he be only 16? 16, huh? Baron Captain stroked his stubbly chin, pondering. It looks like there's only one explanation. This Baron Rain is a young man with a strong talent for swordsmanship. Otherwise, there's no way to explain these cut surfaces and depths, Baron Captain said, looking at the cliff face, observing many traces very similar to the sword mark he just observed. People with a talent for swordsmanship although rare, when considering the whole of Minster Province, or even the Empire, aren't that uncommon. Actually, in another squad of the Special Department Wavestepper, Baron knew of a member who possessed a very strong talent for swordsmanship, probably on par with this young Baron Rain in strength. "Captain, I think you need to take another look over here," a Fish Dragon squad member said, his expression odd as he looked at both Baron and the young man with the document. Seeing the expression of the team member, Baron instantly sensed something ominous. Could there be some new situation? Baron followed the team member, continuing along the rocky wall for more than 20 meters. Then the markings on the rock changed significantly, from deep sword gouges dozens of centimeters deep to marks resembling claw scratches. "Is this a beast?" Baron's pupils shrank. Carefully examined the dense claw marks on the cliff face and the 4 deep little holes occasionally placed at the positions of the phalanges. "No, these aren't the marks of a beast's claws. They must be from some kind of... Yes, they should be traces of Finger Tiger." Baron pondered for a moment before speaking in a deep voice, but soon his expression became puzzled again. Clearly, these could not have been made by Skull Crusher Wallord, since Wallord was experienced in using a one-handed warhammer. If memory served, his secondary weapon was supposed to be a short dagger. Baron touched the occasional obvious fist impressions, murmuring such an effect wouldn't be possible without over a decade of rigorous practice. Which means these definitely weren't left by Wallord. Everyone at the scene looked at each other with bewilderment. "This, Captain, is it possible that the young Baron Rain is also a martial arts genius?" one of the team members asked hesitantly after mulling over it. About an hour later, near the sea surface of the island where the Iron Beak Sea Eagle was located, something resembling a periscope suddenly emerged. After the lens rotated around, 2 men dressed in special leather coats appeared above the surface of the water. "Brigadier General, I feel you needn't have come to meet him personally," the younger man beside him said. "Wallord, that guy, always had an ambiguous attitude towards us. Now that the Black Sail pirate group has been completely destroyed by the Dragon Empire's navy, only then does he think of us. It really is a won't shed tears until they see the coffin kind of guy. Now his value to our Federation has greatly diminished," he said with a smiling face. The middle-aged man beside him nodded his head, seemingly in agreement with the young man's analysis. However, he changed his tone and said, "Although the Black Sail pirate group has been wiped out, Wallord's personal strength is very good. Senior level 3 wizard apprentice and great knight, he still can be worthwhile to rope in." "That's true. It's impressive that he managed to escape this time," the young man pondered and then agreed after thinking. "Additionally, the most important point is that, according to reliable information, Wallord knows the location of an ancient goblin ruin on a remote island. It's very possible that there, in that ruin, lies the power device solution that our Eagle Federation has been unable to conquer." The middle-aged man revealed an important piece of information. "So that's also why I personally came over," he disclosed. "I see." The young man's face clearly showed surprise upon hearing this news. Soon, the 2 men arrived at the location indicated by the communication device, near Wallord's fish grilling bonfire from before. Where is he?" "The device is right here. This should be the place, no mistake." After searching and finding no trace of Wallord, the young man immediately expanded the search area. "Brigadier General, there are footprints here. Should be Wallord's this direction." Following Wallord's footprints, the 2 quickly found themselves near the cliff. Upon seeing a scene that looked like a small-scale war had taken place, they exchanged puzzled looks. After inspecting the site, the young man pointed to a place on the ground with scattered footprints and said, "Sir, it must be the Empire's navy pursuers. They discovered Wallord before us. This line of footprints is the best proof." The middle-aged man nodded, affirming the young man's judgment. Feeling encouraged by his superior's agreement, the young man continued with his analysis. "Over there on the cliff, there are many traces of a dual-handed greatsword chopping, which indicates that among the Imperial search team there is a master-level swordsman. And on this side of the cliff, there are many claw-like weapon marks as well, indicating there is another expert close to the master level. At the same time, there are scratches from a dagger on the cliff, yet no hammer marks from Wallord's favored weapon, which is very strange." As the young man spoke, he resumed his search and finally spotted marks on the ground resembling those of a heavy warhammer impact. "Found it here. This is the imprint of his skull warhammer. These are the marks of a 2-handed hammer," the young man joyfully exclaimed. I get it, it was 3 against 1. Sir, it seems that Vorod has been defeated. The young man bent down, picking up several strips of leather armor fragments near a cliffside indented with the shape of a human body, and said. The Federation colonel examined the leather armor fragments in the young man's hands, then looked down at the large pool of blood on the ground and nodded. Indeed, and what's more, he likely did not escape. Judging from the footprints on the ground and the traces of the battle, it seems there were 3 master-level practitioners specializing in swords, war hammers, and finger tigers attacking Vorod. Those footprints over there likely belong to a wizard apprentice from the Dragon Empire's pursuit detachment, aiding from the sidelines. The young man pondered for a bit, seemingly putting himself in the shoes of the other, and said, That's true in such a situation, even with Vorod's strength, defeat would be inevitable. The naval force of the Dragon Empire made a bold move, dispatching such a formidable team to deal with Vorod. However, if that's the case, sir, the location of the ancient ruins that Vorod possessed. The middle-aged man's expression grew solemn, and after contemplating for a while, he said, Although the Federation doesn't want to face the Empire head-on at the moment, the ruins that Vorod controlled are of great significance to us. At the very least, the ancient ruins must not fall into the hands of the Empire. John Stone, contact the higher-ups and request coordination with Leviathan team, and have them pursue the Empire's naval pursuit team. If I'm not mistaken, such a powerful team likely comes from the Dragon Empire Special Division, the Wave Walkers. Additionally, charge the nearby forces to start investigating. This area should fall under Meister County of the Dragon Empire, right? Reach out to the Zaral Resistance forces, those guys, and have them look into this matter. Command after command was orderly issued from the Federation colonel's mouth, especially Jonastone, the young man, whose eyes lit up upon hearing the mention of Leviathan team. Yes, sir. This is Meister County. Zaral Resistance has mentioned to me before that they've established a new stronghold here. I will get in touch with them immediately and have them cooperate with the operations. The Federation colonel nodded and said, If Vorod is detained nearby, then have the Zaral Resistance extract relevant information from him and then deal with him promptly. If he's dead, then track down the interrogation records and Vorod's belongings. Once Vorod has been taken by the Empire's Naval Special Division, then leave the follow-ups to the Leviathan team. A very thorough plan, sir, the young man said with a smile, adding his assent. After boarding the small boat, the huge white owl, Dawhite, as if eager for praise, handed to Rain the pig-head hammer and the glimmering greatsword from each of its claws. Watching Dawhite smugly suck up, Vinica couldn't help but grin. Even animals with enhanced intelligence still venerated the strong. The skull warhammer that Dawhite was holding in its mouth was now in Vinica's hands first, who curiously examined it. She excitedly flipped the skull warhammer up and down, closely observed it, and then turned her head towards Rain to say, Wow, this is Vorod's signature weapon, the skull warhammer. Lord Rain, you might not know, I've heard that this warhammer has a special origin. Oh, then please do tell, Miss Vinica. Hearing Vinica say this, Rain raised an eyebrow with interest and smiled as he looked at the pretty face of the twin-tailed young lady. He too had just glanced at the skull warhammer in the girl's hand. The warhammer was made of 2 parts. The handle was light silver with a metallic sheen, likely a rare metal. The hammerhead was white, with elliptical protrusions and indentations, and upon closer inspection, it was actually a miniaturized human skull, hardened. Presumably, this was why the warhammer was named the Skull Warhammer. Warhammer made from a skull to shatter the skulls of enemies. Interesting indeed, though it did convey a rather barbaric impression. What Vinica said next confirmed Rain's guesses. Lord Rain, you flatter me. Vinica laughed and began to explain. This skull warhammer is said to have been a ritual tool from a native tribe on an island. As you know, a skull is generally one of the hardest parts of an animal, and after being compressed by the witchcraft of the tribe's shamans, its hardness reached a terrifying degree, surpassing ordinary steel. You could say it's not inferior to most rare metals. Moreover, such a witchcraft artifact has undergone years of tribal ritual ceremonies. In a certain sense, it has become an oddity intertwined with the power of belief. I see. Rain nodded, not expecting the skull warhammer to be a ritual tool with quite a history. That said, the skull warhammer was indeed no ordinary object. When collecting the pig-head hammer earlier, Rain had noticed that its head, made with hardened essence gold, had suffered some wear after a fierce battle. but the skull warhammer seemed utterly undamaged. After examining the artifact with interest for a while, Vinica handed the bone warhammer to Rain and said with a sly smile, "Lord Rain, you may well treasure this trophy of war. It will serve as proof of your valor." "Thank you for your praise, Miss Vinica." Hearing the words of the twin-tailed young girl, Rain smiled as well and accepted the warhammer. However, the moment Rain grasped the skull warhammer, he was slightly stupefied. Ding, detecting that the host has obtained a rare item skull warhammer. A special advancement to Warhammer Wizard, Legendary, has been triggered. Preconditions for advancing to Warhammer Wizard, Legendary. First, any formal Wizard Expert. Second, any Hammer-type Transcendent Artifact. Third, any level 12 or above Warhammer-type Extraordinary Combat Skill. Fourth, physical breaking limit of second order over 30%. Current conditions do not meet. Advancement to Warhammer Wizard, Legendary, has failed. This. Looking at the sudden system prompt, Rain's attention was largely captured by one word legendary. This must be the fourth legendary profession panel I've triggered. Considering the power of the Weapon Master, a legendary profession, a wave of excitement surged through Rain's heart. "Lord Rain, what is wrong?" Vinica, standing beside him, couldn't help but ask, seeing Rain lost in thought. "Oh, it's nothing. I just think that what you just mentioned is likely true. This warhammer must have come from some native tribe's sacrificial tool. I can feel a primitive aura." Rain smiled and deftly changed the subject. However, after carefully reviewing the system prompt several times, Rain had an insight. Previously, in the advancement prompt for Wizard Legendary, he noticed that the Wizard Profession panel itself is a legendary profession panel. So this special profession based on Wizard, Legendary, Warhammer Wizard, one can imagine, might even surpass the typical legendary professions in power. To make a simple analogy, it's like comparing the Transcendent Knight profession panel and the Great Knight Transcendent profession panel. Although both are Transcendent profession panels, obviously, the Great Knight Transcendent profession panel is much stronger than the Transcendent Knight profession panel. A reasonable assumption would be, if the Transcendent Knight profession panel is at a mid-level in Transcendent professions, then very likely the Great Knight Transcendent profession panel may be the pinnacle among Transcendent professions. Similarly, if the Wizard Legendary profession panel is at a mid-level among legendary professions, then the Warhammer Wizard, this special profession, might very well be the top tier among legendary professions. My previous Weapon Master, Legendary, based on the advancement preconditions seen during conversion, should belong to a special advancement under Great Knight. So by this judgment, the Weapon Master Legendary profession panel could only be considered an entry into legendary professions. Of course, it might be on par with a formal Wizard Legendary, but in all likelihood it couldn't compare with this Warhammer Wizard Legendary. However, after giving it some thought, Rain calmed his excitement. "I am still some distance away from becoming a formal wizard, and I also lack a critical defensive first-grade witchcraft. At this stage, my goal is still to primarily explore the combat power of the Weapon Master, this legendary profession. Perhaps, once I officially join the Sword Bearers, I might have more options available on the path of the wizard." Thinking this, Rain remembered that he had been too caught up in intense combat earlier and had not checked the system prompts. Rain scrolled through the system prompts, only then noticing the post-battle system notifications. Skill Giant Bear Sword technique has been improved. Experience plus 998. Your skill Toggle Hammer technique has been improved. Experience plus 1042. Your skill Kadar Martial Arts has been improved. Experience plus 1233. You have experienced a battle. Weapon Master, Legendary. Experience plus 377. Note: the above skill experience has enjoyed a unique talent, Beginner Extraordinary. Understanding 30% boost. Congratulations, your Weapon Master Legendary profession level has increased. Congratulations, any of your legendary profession levels has reached LV2, unlocking golden skill points. Note: golden skill points can be synthesized from 3 skill points or can also be obtained by defeating formidable enemies. Weapon Master Legendary immediately went up a level, gaining another attribute point and skill point, restoring the remaining attribute points back to 5 and the remaining skill points from 0 to 1. At the same time, Rain excitedly discovered that the profession level of Weapon Master, Legendary, had reached LV2, 284/300, nearly advancing to LV3. Certainly, fighting against the powerful brings sufficiently rich experience rewards from the system. Huh, these golden skill points are meant for, Rain pondered thoughtfully. At that moment, Vinica, standing beside him, interrupted Rain's contemplation. She held a purple gigantic egg in her hands, with slightly furrowed brows. She looked up at Rain and said, "Lord Rain, please forgive me. I can't recognize this bird egg as any type I am familiar with." Vinica shook her head, a bit embarrassed. After all, being a third-level wizard apprentice, specializing in bird transformation, and unable to identify a random bird egg brought by Rain was somewhat embarrassing. However, Lord Rain, based on the size of the egg, it's unlikely to be an iron-beaked sea eagle's egg. Perhaps this egg comes from some brood parasitic bird species. Brood parasitic? Rain frowned and asked. Yes, Lord Rain, it's where eggs are laid in the nests of other bird species, making other birds help raise them. We call this brood parasitism, Vinica explained.